Okay. Direct democracy is mob rule.
Well, yeah, but it's just a single person rule, right?
It's not actually a good thing.
Um, I think it's a good thing. Okay. Like otherwise you just have no democracy. That is not like you see what I mean? You can have representative democracy, but it's also mob rule because you just end up choosing representatives, but it's still mob rule. Um, the point is that mobs shouldn't actually and hi anyway. Mobs shouldn't actually be narrow-minded. That's the point. We should have really educated people that know what is good. That way you can actually have mob rule and it's not a
What is a
problem.
republic, as you see it?
It's mob rule, basically. Yeah, it's where everybody gets to have their say, and it's the people get to have their say on issues, and
Is there a difference between a republic and a democracy?
not really, not really. I would say potentially you could conceive that you'd have a republic without people voting, but I don't see how you'd do it if they're not voting. Um, to me, that they're synonyms. Um, like republic is like public affair, and democracy is the power of the people, basically. But um, I I don't know of any republic which isn't a democracy, or at least some countries are nominally republics, but they then aren't democracies. I mean, if they're nominally republics but not actually
MM,
republics.
NP,
See,
NP, did you know that republics are a form of government which was specifically invented with the intention of limiting and constraining democracy?
republics include all democracies. Republics, there are different forms of
Democracy
government.
destroys republics and republics resist democracy.
I don't necessarily agree with that assessment. Um, I don't think, I don't know if you're referring to something in
MM,
particular.
would you like to chat about it?
Okay, we can, if you want to, sure, sure. Um, oops, oops.
I'll be home in about an hour. I'll Discord then.
Okay, okay, all right. I actually might not be there, but if I just check if I'm there. I'll likely be there. So yeah, sure, sure.
NP, NP.
Um, do you since I mean since you're do you want to still stay, or are you I don't know, since right now you're on your phone, are you gonna be hanging around, or are you gonna be doing other stuff? I think, well, my point is that democracy only properly works anyway if
I'll idle a little on and off.
okay. I think democracy only works if a majority of people are wise, and um that is really the biggest issue with democracy. I would say that republic also is conceived as being democratic, and I think it's very difficult to not have, but it might not have a direct democracy. But just like democracy doesn't necessarily have a direct democracy, nor does a republic. It's conceived still as having the people. The power is in the people and not in the monarch. It's kind of, to me, a republic is kind of like the opposite of a monarchy, but so is a democracy. Um, and yeah, there's constitutions and stuff which are anti-democratic mechanisms. Definitely, you've got constitutions which are, which are designed to limit democracy. You could say that also representative democracy is a limitation to democracy. Um, but you know, to me that's unfortunate. I favor full direct democracy. You've got it in Switzerland. You've got it in Switzerland. Switzerland's doing all right, I think.
https://www.foundingfatherquotes.com/article/22.
Yeah. Well, the more I think about it, the less I like the U.S. Constitution personally. Um, it was designed by rich people to basically remain in power. Um, yeah, okay. This is the kind of when they say that the United
Just as a
States.
heads up, people don't really know this, but republics and democracies are opposed systems of government.
I don't agree. That is basically that is propaganda by members of the Republican Party in the United States to make them seem like the real Americans. It's not. They're not opposed forms of democracy. Um, yeah, there's a type and form of government, and um, but this is the point is that it's ruled by majority, and but democracy doesn't necessarily mean the actual exact rule by democracy by majority. It does still have a rule by majority. See, a republic is a commonwealth, a state in which the exercise of the sovereign power is lodged in representatives elected by the people. In modern usage, no. From what I've seen, any democracy is also a republic. It differs from it's to me the republic is the opposed of a monarchy. Okay. In modern usage, it differs from a democracy, democratic state in which people exercise the power of sovereignty in person. I have seen different definitions of this. Like they say the democratic republic of such and such country is because typically um
This will
it,
be
it,
a pretty edifying chat. Don't waste time reading the prologue, just read the quotes from the founding fathers.
okay, Alexander Hamilton. We're now forming a republican form of government. Real liberty is not found in the extremes of democracy, but in moderate governments. If we incline too much to democracy, we shall soon shoot into monarchy or some other form of dictatorship. Hamilton, in the last letter he ever wrote, warned that our real disease is democracy. Um, Yeah, but again, remember these are rich dudes that don't want the poorer people to get to have the say. Here he says, a democracy is nothing more than mob rule where 51% of the people may take away the rights of the other 49. That's why you have a constitution. But that you limit that by the constitution. But I mean, elected officials can very much also just rule by in a mob rule fashion. That's even that's oligarchy. Um, representative democracy is just oligarchy. Um, it's not somehow more it's not more republican, it's not sort of more liberal or something. If you're referring to avoiding having oppression of minorities by the majority,
The value
that
in the link was just to show that democracy and republics are indeed different forms of government. That point alone is sufficiently unknown today that even pointing that out is a whole effort on its own.
except I disagree because I've seen other definitions where that is not the case. um well, I think it's like this issue of communism and socialism where even Marx and Engels themselves
NP.
had like separate they had separate definitions of they mixed their definitions all the time. They didn't have consistent definitions of socialism and communism. I would say that democracy and republics are also like that. um Look, these are quotes that I very much presume are this is going to be done by a Republican Party supporter to show that the United States is not a democracy, um, and so that way it makes them seem more legitimate by having the name of Republican. You see, this is what this is what is this is what I think is. Yeah, they say it devolves into democracy, and so this is really weird. But no, you get a constitution, and you've got the purpose of you've got some founding principles. You've got to have just some founding principles that say you're not allowed to oppress other people. So basically, there's just a rule that you can't. But in this case, it's not even necessarily the constitution, but you should have a set of rules that say that you're not allowed to oppress others. So you just have that there's a non-discrimination sort of. There should be a fundamental non-discrimination rule in all democracies, and so that you can't just vote in favor of discriminating against minorities. That is my position, and I yeah. Yeah, this is just propaganda by this is just
That's
propaganda by right
cool.
wingers.
All fine.
Yeah, this is all propaganda by right wingers. Um, yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about what fundamental rules I would have for a particular thing, a particular place. Um, for my society, what I'd want, and yeah, the fundamental I would say the fundamental rule would be not to discriminate against people for valid reasons. Only for people doing actually bad things. You can't discriminate on any other thing. Um, then of course I believe in stuff like I believe in basic income, so I'd have it as a rule to have basic income and an income and wealth cap. That would actually be literally in the Constitution, like as a very fundamental principle. The existence precisely of democracy would be also enshrined in the fundamental principle. So you couldn't vote democracy through democracy. You couldn't vote to eliminate democracy. Um, but you also couldn't vote against these fundamental principles. These other fundamental principles that I'm talking about either. So you couldn't vote against basic income. You couldn't vote
You should try
against
writing a
maximum income.
constitution. It's very rewarding though very difficult.
Well, I think I've got the ideas. I could just let it to an actual legal person write it, write the actual. I've got the. I've
But
got the.
it'll crystallize your political ideas.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I've already got it in my mind. I've already got it in my mind. I've already thought what needs to be written in the Constitution. But I wouldn't write much. I'd have just a few. I'll just say that there needs to be a democracy, um, with mixed direct and representative democracy. I would say that there So you'd have direct voting, like through initiatives and referendums. That would be part of the Constitution. You'd have, like I said, basic income cap, wealth cap, so that ensures the economic egalitarianism. Um, and then yeah, you'd have a law against discrimination, and I was thinking maybe a law against any kind of any kind of violence, including by the state. So no torture and no death penalty. Um, That would be also in the Constitution. And the basic income, of course, must be designed, to ensure that everybody has access to housing and food and healthcare. Um, so yeah, that has to be taken care of. Everybody has to be able to have that. You could also say that otherwise, potentially, we also allow for like healthcare to be taken care of by the government instead of paying through the basic income. Um, Yeah, so like literally they're saying that they want to get rid of. Yeah, I really don't like this. I really don't like this. It moves closer to socialism, but in any case, that's a form of governance. Socialism is not incompatible with a republic. This is really I don't like this. This is a disinformation. This is really disinformation. And all these people that focus too much on founding fathers already just this thing. It's sort of like this weird kind of homoerotic thing about these fathers. It's like these people with daddy issues or something. Like who focus too much on these like the founders of the United States. The United States was not that great a country, and you gotta it is toxic. You can definitely see the current toxicity of the Republican Party arising from the initial toxicity of the foundation of the United States. Um, I think it's really I think it's unhealthy precisely because if only because it's nationalistic and because precisely it's kind of anti-democratic, and it's basically made in a way meant to benefit uh that's kind of meant to benefit rich people, and it's kind of slavery was still accepted at the time, and it was very nationalistic, so it was I don't like it. I don't actually like the for the time it was not bad, right? Of course, for the time it was remarkable what they did. But for at this point, it's not really something that I'm
I
I'm
like how you
a fan
said
of.
the United States was not a great country, lol.
Really? Um, oh, was not a great country. Oh, you mean the was? Focusing on the was. I think it's gotten better. It's definitely gotten better. But it can't be great because it's still an independent country. I don't think any separatist nationalist entity can ever be great. The only great thing can be the universal society. Anything else is gonna be highly flawed. But it has gotten the United States has gotten better. Republicans think it's gotten worse because they are just attached to their to sort of antiquated values. But I'm quite convinced it's gotten better, notwithstanding the weirdness of the leftists. And I've been clear. I've been clear that I don't support the lefty weirdness. They've become in essence they've become racist. The leftists, in the name of anti-racism, leftists have actually become racist, and that is bizarre. Um, but that notwithstanding, overall it's still become better. It's still become better. We've given the right to vote to, we've given equal rights to all people, like including black people. We've given equal rights to women. We've now established like more protections against discrimination. We've
Name a racist leftist.
pretty much any sort of typical leftist, anyone who like believes in things like affirmative action, who believes that the police is targeting black people
Ilhan Omar
disproportionately.
Kappa.
Um, that pretty much all that stuff. If you think that like there's huge amounts of systemic racism, that is actually racism. So yeah, all those the people who focus the leftists who are focused on anti-racism are actually racist. Anti-racism quote is racism. Um, so yeah, yeah. And hi,
Acknowledging racism exists equals racism.
wholesome. Uh, Not acknowledging racism exists, calling racism what isn't racism, and then trying to fight racism through more racism, just to sort of kind of weird. It's very weird. It's weird. It's a kind of, but it ends up basically trying to equalize stuff between groups, but as a result, it ends up actually discriminating against individuals on the basis of their race, which is racism. Okay, instead of recognizing that you might have, among some races, on average, some races might just be less
Carrying
performant.
reparations to the descendants of slavery is not racism, lol.
All that is exactly racism. That is totally racism. Okay. Wait, are you sort of a no, you're not a fake account. This is the problem, Ibn Talisi. From your perspective, from a right winger's perspective, I'm a commie, but the actual leftists don't stick around because I call them out on
I'm
their
a bigger
racism.
streamer than you, buddy. Tongue sticking out.
Okay, so
You're a
that's my.
centrist.
I like to say I'm a centrist, but I don't think having a maximum income that's only 5 times the basic income is really a centrist position. I didn't even tell you that, but ideally I'd bring it down to that. I don't know if the economy could handle that, but if it did, I'd bring it down to about. I've been hoping to bring it down to that. Um, you would
Enlightened centrist.
presumably think that it's crazy, but that is what I would actually want. So. You're my whole point. Yeah, you are a bigger streamer because you presumably have a sort of some mainstream opinion, whereas I don't. So I don't keep anybody. Uh, I, I only keep people who themselves have eclectic opinions. Uh, you're sort of typical right winger, typical left winger. They don't like me. So and your typical centrist neither, because you're actual the kind of people who call themselves centrists and get called centrists have very different policy ideas than me. So I'm not that kind of a centrist. I I'm just obviously don't pass the litmus tests that leftists and conservatives and libertarians have. Like basically conservatives, the litmus test is you got to be sort of nationalistic and sort of racist in that sense. Then leftists, you've got to be racist. So those are litmus tests. So if you don't pass those tests, you're not really accepted. So I'm not nationalistic. I'm not racist. So I don't pass the conservative test. I don't pass the leftist test. Um, libertarian type people, they want to be able to gain unlimited amounts of money. So they want to not have any income or wealth caps. So I fail that litmus test, and as a result, I'm stuck with just nobody. Um, you see. But luckily, there's few people that still stick around, but they don't agree with me. I haven't had anyone who actually agrees with me. They all think I'm wrong, but at least some people stick around. Um, so yeah, I'm I'm not your typical person. Uh, I want a global society. I'm a globalist. That apparently it's actually not in vogue among sort of individual. It's in vogue more among like the elites, but it's by individuals. I feel that there's people actually are anti-globalist and more like and more towards localism. So That is also like an issue. I want to have one single society with a single unitary government.
Race is
Single.
a social reality.
Okay, yeah. But that's the whole point, is that we should make it stop being a reality, and leftists are entrenching that reality. I want a single, a whole unified system, a single set of laws. So you would have only one global legislative that would be democratically elected, and you would also have direct democracy, which would also be legislative, so people could actually vote on issues as well. Then
You're trying to stop it from existing by not acknowledging it already exists.
no, I do acknowledge it, but I don't believe in creating equality between races. I believe in creating fairness between individuals. Okay, I saw this really interesting video just a while back, where actually you'll see that if you adjust for IQ and income, what you'll notice is that like white kids and black kids of the same income and IQ level, like poor white kids of average IQ and poor black kids of average IQ, have equal chances of like getting out of poverty, equal chances of becoming like middle quintile or top quintile in terms of income than white. Like the black and white, they have the equal
It
chance.
has
So they're
permeated
actually,
through our societies for 600 years. You can't just do away with it by not talking about it.
except that there isn't. It's gone. There isn't systemic racism. Okay, it is not a thing. It is very much gone. There is simply differences in income and wealth, but it's not systemic racism. It's just differences in
Black
income and
people
wealth.
do not have equal opportunities to white people in America. LMAO.
Again, you've bought the racist leftist Kool-Aid. That is what this is. This is what I'm saying. It's wrong. They do have the same opportunities. Okay, they actually do have the same opportunities. Um, you've
Prove
been
it.
so. First, I'm gonna find the video where I was looking at this, and then we're gonna look at or maybe it's still on. Is it this? Is it this? 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 No. Crap. The problem is that people ask me to prove
You're
stuff.
not going to be able to prove it to him.
What do you mean? No, there's this video that we looked at before. Your channel, watch later. Where do I added it to the watch later thing. Where does the watch later thing? Where do I find the watch later? Playlist, channels, discussion about.
When he asks for proof, he means soft racism, not legal racism that you can find in the law books.
I don't just mean that. I mean,
one thing I'd like to point out,
this.
often when I'm talking to non-academic audiences, but I think what I'm about to say is maybe
You cannot prove or disprove the existence of that.
The United States in its totality.
No, you can. Listen, watch this. And then I'll just have to find the original source for this.
There's several thousand, believe it or not, several thousand institutions of higher education that can award an undergraduate degree. And well, now you're not talking about thousands of institutions in the United States. You're talking about
Right, and there are, I think, some studies that show fairly conclusively that IQ is a much stronger, like a significantly stronger predictor than race for escaping the bottom quintile of income.
If you want to test theories of how discrimination works, actually I had arguments with a sociology colleague of mine many years ago about this. I said, look, if you look at there's something called NLSY, which is the National Longitudinal Study of Youth, and it's been going since I think Patrick Moynihan, so probably like more than 50 years now. So you can track individual kids, you know their IQ scores, and you can ask like for a kid born in.
Yeah, this is the problem that you've been. Yeah, you're just. Doesn't matter because it's not Molyneux that's saying it. It's this guy here, Stephen Su, who's saying it.
In the bottom quintile of family social economic status.
I don't think much
what
of
is the
Molyneux's
probability
either
that they escape?
Yeah, but except as Stephen Su.
The bottom quintile, or they make it to the top quintile or the middle quintile. And you can ask, well, conditional on IQ, what's the probability? And you can ask conditional on race. And it turns out that if you take black kids and white kids born in the bottom quintile, but you match them for IQ, they have almost identical probabilities of getting out. So my sociology colleague, when I showed him this data, was just his jaw just hit the floor, and he kind of sort of refused to believe it. But then he sort of looked more carefully at it, and he couldn't refute it. And I said, doesn't this at least put some kind of bound on the level of racism that you think is existing in society? Because wouldn't we be able to detect it very easily this way? If in fact life was so hard for the black kid, how could it be that just by matching IQ scores with a white kid from a similar family environment, they have equal probability of getting out? So
that, and I just want to give you this quote. It's from the great infoproc.blogspot.ca, which we'll put a link to below. Once one accounts for the AFQT score, the entire racial gap in mobility is eliminated for a broad portion of the distribution. I wonder if you could just step people through that statement.
Right. So that's sort of what I was saying. So imagine that you have this huge data set where you've followed huge 100,000 kids for 50 years, something like this. This is a U.S. government funded study that's still ongoing. So pick out all the black kids who scored 100 on their IQ, effectively exactly 100 plus or minus 1 point on their IQ test, and then take all the white kids who scored 100 plus or minus 1 point on their IQ test, and then also only look at the white kids who are in the bottom 20% in the population for family income and education, and also take only the black kids who are also in that lowest quintile for family SES, and then just ask what's the probability that a given white kid with those characteristics got out. And let's say the probability is like, actually, if you have average IQ, almost everybody got out. It turns out. It's kind of funny.
Stephen, who
if you're a
considers
libertarian,
race
you
to
love
be
this
a
data
biological reality.
Well, maybe. But
Shows
there are biological differences between race, obviously. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any, like, there wouldn't
That's
be.
racism.
No, recognizing that there are differences between races is not racism. That's just being
if you're stuck down
it
there.
is a biological reality, LUL. It's literally a phenotypical characteristic. To categorize people.
Yeah, but the whole point is that people now want to categorize.
By race is racism. Phenotype equals expressed genotype.
Yeah, there are differences. Okay. And if there are differences, then it makes sense to expect that there might be differences in socioeconomic outcome, right?
I don't like discussing race.
Actually, there's some problem, right? So almost all the white kids who had IQ of 100 got out of the bottom quintile, and actually almost exactly the same probability, the same fraction of black kids who were born in that bottom quintile got out if their IQs were also 100. And if you do this for different IQ scores, the two curves are almost sitting right on top of each other. So it's almost as if IQ is the number one driver.
It's too emotionally charged for too many people, and it's never worth discussing it.
For what they got out of the bottom.
Really? Yeah, but it's nuts. I just don't understand why people don't get this. I mean,
quintile. And this,
they're like, at this point, there has been past systemic racism, of course. Yeah, the Jim Crow stuff. Yeah, that was systemic racism. Now, no, it's not systemic racism. There's some amount of like discrimination on like, by employers and stuff where if they see a black seeming name or something, they won't respond. Yeah, there is some of that kind of stuff.
But disputed data. This is extremely solid data.
But the problem is that people see that there are differences in outcomes between races and they think it's systemic racism. No, it's not systemic racism, okay? It's just partly a legacy of systemic racism and partly just a legacy of precisely there are different cultures. There are maybe also like differences in, biology, the way people think and that kind of thing. And that will lead them maybe to having different outcomes. You shouldn't expect to have the same outcomes.
https://physicalanth.org/about/physicallanth.statement/AAP-statement-race.
It's been around for a long time. And this is, given that blacks in America are an average of about a give or take a standard deviation below whites and a little bit further than that below East Asians, they do less well. But if you take a slice of East Asians or Ashkenazi Jews or Inuit or whites with an average of 85 IQ, they all do about the same. And I think what the market is fundamentally measuring is not skin color or hair texture or anything like that. It's measuring G. The market measures G, and that is very difficult for people to
It doesn't matter if he's a biologist. This is yeah, he's a physicist, but he's just looking at data. You're just looking at data, and we saw what he just said right there.
You need to understand that systemic racism doesn't refer to racism that results from an identifiable institution, but rather it is a claim that capitalism, writ large, is racist and that racism cannot disappear until capitalism disappears.
Again, systemic racism implies just completely misusing the word systemic and racism. It means using completely different definitions to what we usually to what is usually used. Okay, systemic racism is just as completely just a sort of crazy idea. Okay, this American Association of Biological Anthropomorphists. Okay. Yeah, it's not accurate, but there are differences. Of course, there isn't a clear-cut boundary, right? Of course, there's a clear-cut boundary. And of course, there are differences also. Just because you've got lots of similarity in DNA, we're also we share most of our DNA with like chimps, but there's still obviously differences. Yeah, most aspects of that are typical of a particular race are of course they come from culture. Of course there's culture. But there are also like biological characteristics. That's why we can see that people are different. Different populations look different. But the problem is that they want to keep this race. Leftists want to keep the race. They say, okay, you're part of this race, so now we know that this race on average
The biological distinctions made to define race are arbitrary.
Yeah, and yet you use those arbitrary definitions to discriminate against individuals. You do it to bring all Asian people down. Now in the United States, if an Asian person does well, that person is actually not going to have as many opportunities than other races.
Yes, I do see them because they are a social reality.
They're a social reality because you make them a social reality. You're Ibn Tel, what should I do? What the fuck should I do? Okay, this is madness. This is madness. You're literally saying that like an Asian person should be penalized for being Asian. Okay, you're literally saying that we should penalize Asian people just for being Asian. Okay, they have the same grades, but nope, they can't get in because they're Asian. They have a grade which would be passing for any other race, but nope, because Asians are do
Don't
better.
Discuss race. There is literally zero to gain from dying on that hill. I never said that. That's insane.
Actually, there is to gain, considering that I'm actually, obviously much more on the left-wing spectrum when you look at my policies.
You can tackle race by proxy through other political issues.
Yeah, but notice that I'm actually on the left-wing side of the spectrum, so if I get seen as sort of defending this kind of thing, which is seen as a right-wing thing, I actually then appear more of a centrist, which is what I want, you see? So I actually want to get, leftists as angry as possible. I want to antagonize leftists more because my overall policy is going to be perceived as being much more leftist than rightist, right? A global society, global democracy without any borders and a basic income and an income and wealth cap. I mean, come on.
I tackle race issues by proxy through discussing other policy issues. TF, Mad.
But you see what I mean? Well, maybe not you, Matt, but yeah. What I need is to get I need to find ways to seem more right wing. I need everything I can to seem as right wing as possible. Because otherwise I'm just gonna be perceived as just another weird, another lefty that all the right wingers don't like. Okay, so I need to have solid right wing elements to garner sympathy from the right. You see, so it is actually a hill worth dying on, because it's actually not a hill worth I'm dying on. In a way, I'm actually winning. Precisely, the more I can get leftists upset by this kind of thing, I think the more I'm going to get sympathy from the right.
I can promise you that leftists don't think you're a fellow leftist. LUL.
they get mad at me, but come on.
Yes, race is a biological reality. Are you mad, lefties? TF.
Didn't say that race as specific boundaries of race, is a biological reality, but there are different, of course, like why it is a biological reality that there are different populations that have different genes, and so yeah. Leftists don't think I'm a fellow leftist, but come on, I mean, the amount of like conspiracy theorizing about like the New World Order and this stuff there is. The huge amount of nationalism. I mean, imagine the resistance to that there is among conservatives towards globalism, towards and
the
also
racial
towards
distinction
welfare.
is arbitrary. Race is not a valid biological category. Leftists will look at you and say, liberals get the bullet too. Actually look that up. Marxists plan to kill centrists and center-left-leaning moderates too.
Well,
they do not think you, a moderate, are a comrade.
But I'm not really moderate. That's my whole point. Like, I'm not a centrist like what people call centrist. I'm not that, okay? Like, that is a right winger, okay? I mean, in many ways. I mean, come on, a global universal basic income, which is the same for everyone on Earth, irrespectively of any countries, and getting rid of borders. Like, don't you see what I mean? Ibn Tell, like, don't you see that it's pretty, like, it's a lot easier to get leftists on board than right wingers on board, and those Marxists, they're really rare, they're common on Twitch, right? But actually,
I promise you that any political ideologue will categorize you as a moderate. Marxists will say you are a reactionary.
Yeah, you say that, but have you actually seen the discussions I've had with actual conservatives? They call me a commie. Okay, and I can understand that because I mean, come on, it's like, they definitely do not classify me as a moderate. I like to claim I'm a moderate, but I know that I don't get seen as that. You got to understand that this is rare, like it's common among like teenagers and like 20 somethings, and I suppose, but it's not actually common among the general population, to believe and to actually be a Marxist or to be, a
Did
socialist.
You vote?
And when, where, for who? The last time I voted was, for the United States presidential election. I voted for Biden. If that's what you want to know. I also vote in California, so I voted on a bunch of California things.
Cool.
I don't remember what I don't remember what it was, but I voted for all the left-wing stuff so yeah. I voted, I'm registered in Santa Cruz, California. So yeah.
You're a very run-of-the-mill syndicalist, other than the UBA thing, which is very leftist, but aside from the UBA, you're a centrist.
Syndicalist? I wouldn't call myself a syndicalist. I don't care much about unions. I'm not anti-union, but I'm not pro-union either.
If you take away the UBA, you are just a centrist.
Income cap, wealth cap, come on. And the fact that I want to get rid of separate countries, come on, that is like the sort of bogeyman of right-wingers, right? Like, that's literally all that is, like the bogeyman of right-wingers. I just don't believe in the weird lefty stuff.
UBA is kinda neolib.
Well, I believe in market economies, right? I'm very much a market econ. I wouldn't say capitalist, because capitalist sort of implies being able to accumulate as much capital as you want, and I think capitalism isn't really the right way to refer to a modern economic system, right? First, it's a mixed economy. There are elements. It's partly socialist, right? In as much as the government is doing stuff that could really be construed as being socialism, and then, of course, most of the economy is market.
Then perhaps just a pretty oddball capitalist centrist with UBA sprinkled on top.
Yeah, I mean, I think unions should have the right to exist. I don't support right to work laws, because I think they're actually a limitation to to the freedom of the market. So I don't support that. I support even if it's actually beneficial for the economy to have right to work laws. I still think it just makes things. It is government. Bizarrely, it's actually government intervention to have right to work laws. But I definitely don't support having unions be be somehow propped up by the government, be given special privileges by the government. I think you could just have private, if you're going to have unions, it really has to be private. There's no like government union or anything. There's no government support of unions. I don't believe in like giving special privileges to worker co-ops or things like that, like many sort of anarchist or socialist leaning people support. So I'm not into any of that stuff. I want to keep the system like
a free market.
I want to keep the system like it is now. I just want to limit the inequality of the system through the UBI and plus income cap and wealth cap. But that is pretty distinct, right? As long as I had just the UBI, I could be construed as a centrist, like someone like Andrew Yang or something, right? But because of the income and wealth cap, suddenly now I'm alienating all the the rich elite. I'm alienating lots of people. Pretty much all the quote.
At Wholesome Games, I'm gonna free myself into your market. Krigasm.
You see what I mean? I got like suddenly all these sort of pro-market people, all these sort of neo-lib types, they're not gonna like me anymore, right? As long as I didn't have that, then all the sort of big tech people, the big, not big, big business people, big bank people, all of those people would support what I'm saying. But in a way, it's almost good that I don't get their support because precisely there's lots of conservative sort of reactionism towards that sort of thing, right? It's the sort of globalist elite that they're always talking about, right? So if I didn't have the income and wealth cap, then I would just be seen as a mouthpiece for the globalist
Imagine
elite.
getting fucked by your free market healthcare, Krigasm.
I've advocated for having government paid healthcare, actually. I think it's a very specific, odd sort of sector of the economy, and that actually, as such, there are few sectors like that require the government to take care of it, and I think healthcare is one of those where it benefits from being taken care of by the government. We had some discussions before with Immantel about that yesterday. Like basically the stuff that the sectors where the government is currently involved should be, should have government involvement in it. So yeah, healthcare, education for children, not higher education.
OOHNNNG, I filed my forms and they got back to me with a DD denial, Krigasm.
So yeah, education for children should be paid for by the government. Infrastructure, construction of infrastructure by the government. Police, garbage collection. That's the sort of stuff that maybe there's a few other things, but and of course the actual system of governance, right? So the actual elected officials and all that, and the buildings for that and the administration for that, and so yeah, that is what is where the government is needed. Beyond that, it's not. I don't really support more government takeover. So I think we've got a good system. The way it's most of modern rich countries are doing, that is the way it should be. But there needs to be UBI and there needs to be an income and wealth cap, so that they create much more equality.
I'll be home soon.
All right. Yeah. Cool. So that way you can have much more equality between individuals. Of course, race isn't a clear-cut concept. There isn't such a thing. You can't say this person is that race, this person is another race, but you can say that, there are obviously differences between different groups, between different populations. So yeah. But since I'm looking back at this again. But anyway, I'm not focusing. My point is that leftists, they always focus on race, and they think that there's racism even when actually there isn't. And they call systemic racism something which shouldn't be called systemic racism. And this is a problem. Just focus on getting an actual fair system, but don't focus on race. Race is not. It's like a distraction. It's a distraction. The actual issue is not race. The actual issue is inter-individual economic inequality, economic unfairness. And the way to address that is through a basic income and an income cap and a wealth cap. So yeah, that's why I'm advocating for it. And of course, globally, right? What matters, like again, if you don't believe in globalism, you don't actually believe in fairness. The only way to achieve
So
fairness
you
is
disagree
globalism.
with the AAPA, okay?
Mm, you mean the AABA? Oh no, AAPA?
Genetically we are the same. Geographically we are not.
What are hi ex-pagan? Hi. What do you mean? No, there are clearly genetic differences. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to tell that a particular person is like, of a particular ancestry, right? But no, we can. We can tell that they're
they're
different
now.
phenotypes.
Not I'm built different LUL.
So yeah. Yeah. Hopefully all of this that I said makes sense. I don't know if this made sense. And let's see. Oh, Justin Freakin just followed. I don't think I even saw the follow. I don't remember that follow. Maybe it's when I stopped. I think it's when I stopped streaming. Somebody followed me while I stopped streaming. Interesting. I wonder how that person found me. Well, anyway. Yeah, this is what modern leftists like in the West.
Yes,
quote,
I'm not
meaning
like a genetic bottleneck.
I don't know what you mean by genetic bottleneck. Genetic bottleneck is when you've got a very strong reduction in the population, so that you get sort of a loss of genetic diversity of your population. That's what a genetic bottleneck is. Anyway, yeah, leftists should be focusing. Everybody should be focusing. But of course, it's more of a leftist thing, right? To focus on fairness and equality, but you shouldn't focus on race. The race is not really the main issue here. The main issue is just individual unfairness. But I think the reason people have been focusing on race is possibly because the oligarchs actually have sort of diverted attention towards this, and have made it, because they benefit. As long as everybody's focusing on race, then they're not focusing on the fact that there's these people that are ultra rich. And so that way you're not focusing on the real problem, which is the big inequality between people. Race is a diversion. Race is a diversion. You should be
Text
focusing
is not helping
on
here, LOL.
I can get rid of it if you want.
NVM.
I can get rid of the text to speech if that's what you mean. So yeah. Or what do you mean? Yeah.
White guy saying don't worry about racism.
Well, I'm saying that you should, yeah. White guy saying don't worry about racism. Yep, you got me. Got me there. I'm just another evil white supremacist, I guess.
Not a good look, bro.
Not a good look, bro. Yeah, of course not. Why don't you focus on the actual issue? Okay, like the difference in income between the average white person and the average black person is less than 2 to 1.
Says the other white guy.
Okay. Meanwhile, the difference in income between like the top earner and the bottom earner in the world is like many billions to 1. Okay, that is the bigger problem. Okay, not the less than 2 to 1 ratio of income between the white income and black income. Okay, that is comparatively, it's nothing. And actually, black Americans, if you're presumably because everybody's focused on America, black Americans actually earn better than most people in most countries in the world. They earn a lot better. They earn way more. They earn way more. Black Americans earn way more than the average person on Earth, than most people pretty much anywhere.
Class vs racial identity.
I don't believe in class either. It's not about class identity. I don't like that Marxist analysis of class. It's not class. It's just income and wealth. It's not. There's no sort of clear-cut boundary or anything like that. It's just unfairness that we need to
Wanna become famous? Buy followers, primes and viewers on is.gd/ms2md, big follows com. Wanna become famous? Buy followers, primes and viewers on is.gd/ms2md, big follows com. Wanna become famous? Buy followers, primes and viewers on is.gd/ms2md, big follows com.
Jesus, I told you.
Believes in biological race, doesn't believe in class LUL. LOL. The bots, bro. If we truly mean to exterminate the white race, we have to first figure out how to preserve white women without white men. Cause imagine a world without white women. Big yikes.
This is Ibn Tel fucker of white women, black from Haiti or something, presumably, although we don't know. So yeah. I think this is nuts. I don't believe in clear-cut races. I believe that I don't believe it. It's obvious, right? The fact that black people are black means that there is a biological difference between different populations, right? I don't believe in treating people differently, just like I don't believe treating like classes, okay? None of this shit.
I do it for my people seems good.
Do it for people. Yeah. Yeah. Just I don't I don't get this. I don't get it. I don't get it. It's just they just don't get it. Leftists are weird. They're racist and they don't get it. They think they're being anti-racist and actually they're racist and they
There
don't
are
understand.
biological differences. They just aren't described through race.
You can describe them through population groups. You can describe them through whatever. Race is not the best name probably because there isn't any clear-cut like there are always gradations, right? There are always blends. There's always intermediary forms and stuff. But like there are differences obviously, and there are cultural differences, and what the left doesn't understand is also that multiculturalism is racist, and to sort of expect that if you're of a certain racial group, then you should be of a certain culture, and that you should act in such and such a way. That is racism, okay? And left are champions at racism now. Leftists have become, except for a few except for some actual like far right people, I would say leftists have now become more racist, because they're literally it's all about treating people differently according to your race. So that is racism. Like literally you have different sets of rules that apply to you depending on what your race is. You have different sets of, you're not held to the same standards depending on your race. That is weird. That is weird and it's wrong and it's racist but you don't get it. You think that I'm the racist for recognizing that you are racist. And no matter how much I explain it, you just don't get it. You just don't get it. And I wish they could get it, but it just doesn't happen. They're just nobody gets it. And never mind that I'm actually advocating for global basic income, which would help black
But we
people
do live
more.
in a world where the color of your skin greatly impacts your life, the wealth you are born into, your likelihood of getting a job, etc.
Not the latter.
etc.
Not the latter.
Leftists are definitely worse than the rightoids are.
Well, it depends in what way, and it depends who. I wouldn't actually agree with that. I don't agree with that. The rightoids are definitely terrible. But leftists have gone nuts. And so like the wealth you're born
right
into,
now,
but who can
the leftist type of racism is more harmful long-term for black people than the alt-right's current form of racism. The latter is one of the most proven facts in social science.
I know, yeah, okay, it is true. There is a difference, but it's not like we saw that in reality it's not
I really
mostly.
shouldn't talk about race.
Well, why not? Yeah, I would say because the alt-rights, nobody's getting behind it, see? The alt-right people know that it's racism, and it doesn't really have much traction, whereas the leftist racism is having a lot more traction, and that is why it's more harmful.
Adibintal thanks Thomas Sowell.
Then yeah, I know. I've seen these tests where like black people get less responses to like job applications if they have like a black name or something. I know about that. I know about that. But we saw like the other thing. There was that thing where we saw that actually black people have the same chance of getting out of poverty. So and if you're more likely to be born into wealth, but why? Who cares? Who cares? I mean, why is it okay that you're born into a poor family as a white?
Aren't those studies fucked?
Why isn't it okay to be born? Uh, why is it okay to you? Why is it more okay that you're born into a poor white family than to be born into a poor black family? Like it in all cases it's not great.
Hendren-Jones-Porter. Sorry, damn TTS.
Yeah, I can turn it off.
Vox, I see you're using a non-biased source. LOL.
There's less upward mobility.
That
okay.
TTS ha 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 ha.
There's less upward mobility.
You may need to take it off.
Yeah. Yeah, but then we saw it because they're not adjusting for IQ here. They're not adjusting for IQ.
IQ is also an arbitrary measure of intelligence.
Not arbitrary. I mean, it's not entirely.
It's not though.
Meaningless. It's not meaningless. It's not like, I mean, you could have another measure of intelligence, right? But it's, oh, look, black men enjoy much less mobility than white men, but the gap between black and white women is small. Okay, and why is that? Maybe because black men end
Trust me, I know.
getting into criminality.
I have a very high
right?
IQ.
Right? Maybe because, see, look, it's not true for black women. This indicates again that it's probably that black men actually just get into trouble. Okay, and for the black women, it's not. Okay, maybe, for instance. But here they say another possible explanation for this phenomenon is that white women are likely to stay home and work fewer hours than black women. Okay, so then you're seeing and that would actually make sense because otherwise you'd expect. I mean, it sort of would be weird otherwise that black women and white women would be exactly the same. So yeah, presumably black women actually work harder, and so that compensates kind of for the moderate disadvantage, and it compensate also for like lower IQ. So yeah. In any case, it's not really that obvious, you know, to what extent, because IQ also varies. Like if a kid gets labeled IQ, then suddenly that kid's IQ is going to be a lot higher. So like yeah. Hours worked. Oh yeah, employment rate males. We're not seeing in females. Wait, or are we? Incarceration. Okay, white, black. But we know that crime rates are higher among black people too, right? Black people have higher crime rates. They do. Murder rates are actually.
The black-white income gap isn't about genes or family structure.
It partly is. It's not entirely. Of course, it's not entirely. But it's about a whole host of different factors. But why would there isn't that big a gap anyway? This is the other thing that like the it's not that big. Okay, so so here we can see that it's not just a gap of income based on like earnings and stuff. Yeah. Look,
crime rates are insane in the black community, unfortunately. Fatherlessness, drug use, suicide.
Yeah, and this is what people don't understand. So, like, I don't know. Like, and in any case, the gap is not that huge. Okay, like I said, there's not even a 2-to-1 ratio in income. It's not that big. Okay, a much bigger deal is just the inter-individual.
Okay, I'm home now. I wouldn't mind talking about the Republic vs democracy thing.
Okay, let's do that.
* democracy. Arguing that black men are inherently dumber and therefore poorer is just good old bell curve racism. But I'll steer clear of the race thing.
Okay, but you've told me that you're like sort of black or ish or something yourself,
No one's
right?
saying they're dumb.
Or did you not? It seems to me that you said you're black, right? Or sort of black, like partly or something. Okay, so this is Ibn Tel is Nom Nom Puffs on this, if you need to know. So we can do this. Okay, is this working? Oh wait, okay. All right, I should be connected. Ibn Tel, Nom Nom.
What's up? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear fine. So.
All right, and I hear you just fine. Okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So
you want to argue
I think we were
Republic
talking
versus democracy?
Yeah. So I think there's sort of two goals here.
No, you can hear me, right? Oh yeah, you can hear.
Yes, I hear you just fine.
Yeah, no,
I hear you just fine.
Chat, because some said can hear, but I thought that was weird. Yeah, no, it means can and not can't. So yeah, it's all good. Okay, go for it.
Okay, so I think there are two main goals here. The first being to determine whether or not there is a difference between republics and democracies, a substantive difference, which actually, is important. And then when we get past that, if we get past that, then to determine whether or not, whether the differences that are introduced by the Republican system, assuming that there is a substantive difference, whether there is value in those differences,
Well, for the way I would see it is that, yeah, like republics basically means res publica, public affair, right? And so it's, yeah, the whole idea is that it concerns
monarchist
public. And so it basically
laughing face.
What monarchist laughing face? What do you mean? So I guess my point here is that republic is really just opposed to a system where there's some kind of authoritarian ruler or it's opposed to oligarchy or monarchy, something like that, right? To autocracy. Yeah, there's not. It's to me, it's largely synonymous. To me, republic and democracy are really synonyms, and you couldn't really. I know you could construe it. Like I guess it depends on the definition. Just like some people have different definitions of socialism and communism, and there isn't necessarily just one definition. And likewise, some people would call a republic only like a representative democracy. But I think then you should just call it that. You should call it a representative democracy. I think that makes more sense. That way, you're being more clear. Republic means literally public affair, and it means it's any kind of sort of democratic, semi-democratic thing. So yeah. Okay, so here I'm looking just at the Wikipedia thing, where you had this sort of mix of different of these sort of different things, where you had some aristocrats, but you also had like citizens who had like assemblies and stuff. This is what they're saying. I would say the term republic is somewhat vague, but and depending on who you ask is going to have a different definition, and so yeah, in a way, I'm not even sure it's relevant. What we could say instead is that there are different types of republics or different types of democracies, and that then, you could then argue for the benefits of one type or another type of republic or democracy. But I don't really like this opposition of
democracy is the rule of many, Republic individuals contesting
and I think I'll just raise
rules.
a third thing. So I guess it's always useful to outline the goals of a discussion before you So I guess the first goal was first to determine whether or not there is a difference. Then number two, to determine whether or not there's value in the distinction. There's value in what differences republics bring to the table.
Yeah.
And then third, to finally tackle the question of the subject of your stream, which is why direct democracy is not more widespread. But perhaps not to actually directly answer that question, but to explore why I would say it's not a good thing for direct democracy to be widespread. Yeah. So I guess I'll just begin by so people think that there's no real distinction between republics and democracies, but there is, and they are completely opposed, not just different, but opposed systems of government.
But again, that is your definition. Just to be clear, it's not my definition. It's not the standard definition. The standard definition is that a democracy is a republic. Okay, but okay, I'll let you go on. But yeah.
No problem. So I'd like to sort of trace the history here. So in Greece, sometime around the time when around the time of after the Persians, after the time of the Persians, the war between Greece and Persia, when Athens overcame Persia, there was some political unrest, and in various, because the state, the Greek culture and state was evolving in various different ways politically, and the burden fell upon this man called Cleisthenes, Cleisthenes, and he was the leader of the moment, and so. Oddly enough, he was an aristocrat, and there was an sort of nobility rebellion, but he somehow ended up being the person whom the people chose to spearhead the direction that the fledgling state would take. Now, obviously, in that situation, he couldn't just try to reimpose a new nobility-based government, a new aristocracy. And well, he also didn't really know what else to do, so he just thought, well, I'll have this system of voting. And he's called the father of democracy because he was, effectively the one who introduced democracy into the Greek state. Now, the way it works is that every 9 days, I think it's every 9 days or something, all the men of Athens would gather together and they would vote with stones. A white stone meant yes, a black stone meant no, and so on and so forth. And of course, you probably know the whole story, but eventually, this is how they voted to have Socrates killed, and so on and so forth. And that's a short history of the beginnings of democracy. Now, republics come into the picture, starting with Rome. Rome, one of the sort of the core of all Roman law, the whole idea of this, the jus, the J-U-S, juice, what you have, so justice, what we think of as justice is just a Roman notion. It's a jus means a right, so you go to court to enforce a right and all that, and these rights, where they come from. So there was this thing called the Lex Aquilia, L-E-X, then A-Q-U-I, L-I-A, I believe, and that was a table of.
Yes, it's sort of like.
Yeah. So that was it was like the constitution of ancient Rome, and it was this table of 10 sort of rights or sort of things that people could claim before the courts, and they were the foundational laws of the Roman Republic, and so. Now that's the history of republics, and it was the first time. So it was the first time when a document, a publicly published document, was the law that ruled the land, as opposed to the whim of some particular group of people. So you could think, okay, you can organize at the end of the day, something or some group or some person rules, right? So whether you have rule by judges, which is Critarchy or kakistocracy. Rule by nobility, and that's aristocracy. Rule by the rich, plutocracy. Rule by majority, which is democracy. Rule by king, which is monarchy. Whatever. Traditionally, every system before the republic, before republics existed, was ruled by some group. And if you think about it, even though there would be a political status quo, if that group, let's say if it's the judges in the land, right, a crytarchy, if among them the consensus became that the law should be changed in a certain way, or a new political status quo should arise, then eventually the laws will follow that group's determination. In other words, the mind and the whim of that group, the ruling group, is the law. Whatever inhabits the minds of that group eventually becomes the law and is in effect the law, whether it's ruled by majority. So whatever inhabits the minds of a majority of the people becomes the law in a democracy which is ruled by majority. Whatever inhabits the minds of the nobles becomes the law in an aristocracy, and so on and so forth. And so every other form of government is ruled by whim. The difference with a republic is that it is ruled by law. So a republic is the rule of law, and what that means is it is ruled by a publicly published document, and what is written in the document is the law. And even if the whims of some, even if it's a powerful group within the society changes, the Constitution is able to buck and to resist the whim of even influential and powerful groups. And the way it does this, so these two things are inseparable, right? Republicanism and the separation of powers. In fact, republicanism is the separation of powers. And what that means really is that if you structure a government such that you take all of the competing interests that exist in a society, so you take different groups and you pit them against each other in the structure of the government, then in theory at least, if you design the separation of powers correctly, no one of those groups will be able to become the ruling group. So it will never become a crytarchy or a monarchy or a democracy or a plutocracy or whatever. Each of the groups will contend with the other, and they will all constantly oppose each other's attempts to become the ruling and dominant group. And that constant vying, that constant striving ensures that the document remains supreme, because the thing that each opposing group will always appeal to when they want to limit the power of another is the document itself. And so power checks power. So by embedding the separation of powers into the structure of the government, it causes the document to become the law. So it is ruled by law, ruled by a publicly published body of law, as opposed to ruled by the whim of some dominant group. That was the whole innovation of
who published law. Then it's the rule of the person who wrote the law. It's the rule of the person
Correct.
who wrote the Constitution.
Correct. And
really better.
So yes. And in that regard, once that Constitution has been adopted or imposed, or however it became the law of the land. So, for example, I fully acknowledge, I agree with you that, for example, in the case of Japan, their constitution was imposed on them, right? The argument here is not about how the constitution comes about being adopted. It's rather about the fact that the constitution and the structure of the government, which is ends up making that document the law, as opposed to some dominant group. And that is the innovation and the difference between republics and every other form of government, including democracy, right? And just to sort of cap things off, so note also that, of course, democracy being rule of majority, if a nation is truly a republic, then the rule by majority is in opposition to the intentions and in practice it is directly opposed to rule of law, right? Because rule of law is rule of that document.
Yeah, but you can still. I don't really agree there, because in as much as you're always going to have if you have elected officials, if you have separations of power, still at some point those powers will agree on some things, and some things will get passed, and you'll have new laws that get made by like your parliament, you'll have new executive orders by the executive branch, etc., new judiciary just decisions that are made. So those all those decisions that get done, they're not based on the founding document, right? It's not based on the Constitution or whatever other fundamental document. It's based by these people who are in positions of power that most of the subsequent decisions get made. So it's not just people just following blindly this pre-existing document.
So several points. You made several sort of points, and I'll try to tackle them all in turn. The first being you pointed out that legislation does get passed, which the purpose of a constitution or the purpose of a republic is not to prevent legislation from being passed. Rather, it is to prevent legislation from being passed which is the will of a dominant group only. Right? Whenever legislation does get passed under a republic, it is going to be broad, sweeping consensus, ideally. That is the entire intention of republics, is to ensure that no dominant group or coalition of groups or whatever is able to dominate a minority. It is direct opposition to rule of majority, right? So the idea is that things like filibusters and gridlock are considered to be ideal and good in a republic, because when these different groups are at loggerheads and they are preventing each other from passing legislation, it means that legislation is not popular enough and not considered to be sufficiently in the interests of everyone in the country, and so it should not get passed, right? In theory, so legislation should be broad consensus, and that is the ideal that that republics try to go for. And
just a question: why wouldn't you maybe support something? If you want to have broad consensus, why don't you just maybe support like a full democracy, but where, for instance, something like 80% of the people have to be in favor of it for the legislation to pass? Something like that. Don't you think that would be kind of equivalent to what we're seeing with this separation of powers?
The response to that is that the things that you encode, that you have traditionally found encoded into constitutions, even in cases where the state itself, the actual observed behavior of a particular country was purely tyrannical and just horrible. So, for example, under Stalin, in the Soviet Union and so on, like, if you read their constitution, it's a beautiful constitution. It guarantees a whole bunch of rights, but in practice, that doesn't actually happen, right? So even in cases where, the adopted constitution is very beautiful, you notice that the actual practice on the ground, if the structure of your government is not such that it limits power and it spreads power out to ensure that no group can become dominant, you end up with oppression. And so there are some sort of definite things you want in a constitution which are not open to the vote of the majority, even 100% majority, right? So one thing you want to note about...
I agree about that, but
one thing you want to note...
Okay, go ahead.
Sure. So one thing you want to note about the nature of a republic is that the things that are written in the Constitution are not open to change, even if 100% of the people vote at the legislative level, not at the constitutional amendment level, but at the legislative level. Even if 100% of the people want, for example, to, in theory, get rid of due process or, something like that. If that's written into the Constitution, then, that will be stricken down in a republic. So that's the purpose, right? So you asked why not replace the rule of law and the separation of powers with just a form of democracy where you need an overwhelming majority. Well,
and a constitution and an overwhelming majority.
I would support that, because that is just republicanism at that point, right? Like, that would be extremely good republicanism. That's like, you have your written constitution, and there are things that even if 100% of the people vote against, they cannot get it, even if they wanted it anyway. And then at the legislative level, if all legislation requires an 80% vote, well, I'd be in favor of that. Sounds very Republican. That's I don't think Marxists would like you saying that at all.
Okay. Yeah, that's sort of I I've I struggle. I think economics, for me, my economic policy was a lot easier to come up with, and I still don't really know what the ideal political system would be. In fact, I'm still not entirely sure. Like I said, I still like direct democracy. I'm Swiss, right? Switzerland has had direct democracy for a very long time, and I think it's working very well. I think, interestingly, there tends to be this kind of phenomenon in Switzerland where people are naturally quite conservative, not so much in terms, not in the sense of a particular ideology, but rather just they don't want to change things, right? They don't want to change things. So most of the time when there's direct democracy and you get to vote on an initiative or a referendum, they vote no, whatever it is, whether it's left or right wing or anything. Most of the time people vote no, and this is despite the fact they only need 50% of the people to vote yes for it to get passed. But so it's almost as if the people are naturally slowing down this process, and it's sort of as it kind of ends up being the same as if you had this 80% limit, but people were much more eager to change things. You see. Um, in Switzerland, it works really brilliantly, and maybe it's because of the sort of rather prudent character of the Swiss people in general that we're really, we don't see these really rash, abrupt changes typically, and it's often I find it quite frustrating because often there are initiatives that I'd like to see passed and that don't get passed, but I'm really not seeing it as a problem, and I don't I would say another thing I would actually contest is that, well, not having a particular law is also a choice. So the point is that, like, if you introduce a new piece of legislation, okay, so for instance, recently there was this legislation that nearly passed, but that didn't pass as like a package for, like, climate change sort of measures to counter climate change. I'm just thinking of that because that was the recent thing that people voted on. Um, it included, like, all sorts of various measures, including taxation and like direct government intervention and stuff. And so anyway, the point is that there's this thing, right? But the point is that, like, not implementing this thing is also a choice. So this is why I don't necessarily agree with this conception um of having 80% of the people support a new piece of legislation, right? Because you could say, that if you have this 80% rule, right, that 80% of the people minimum have to accept this new law, that means that if 21% of the population doesn't want this new law, then that 21% gets to rule over the other 79%. And, like, for instance, here there's this legislation on climate stuff, and so then all the other 79% who wanted to have more sort of more strict measures against climate change, well, these 79% people aren't going to get satisfied, and in fact, it's the 21 minority, the 21% that's going to rule over the 79. So in that sense, in a way, it's even more unfair. Like, at least in your sort of typical democracy, well, it's majority rule. Whereas here, it's like literally minority rule, which is even worse. It's a minority ruling the majority, and the same for all these other initiatives. There's an initiative for UBI in Switzerland, for instance. It got refused, massively refused. But it was 76% refusal, I think, to 24% acceptance, I think. Um, but see, imagine it was the other way. Imagine it was accepted by 76% of people, but then and refused by 24%. But if we have this 80% acceptance rule, then it's basically the 24% that gets to rule the other people. And for me, it's always a choice. So you could also see it the other way. You could see it. uh, I always like to think of it as we shouldn't look at how things are now. We should imagine instead that we don't know whether there's a basic income or not. Okay, we just ignore what's been happening up to now, and we'll say, as of now, do we want a basic income or do we want no basic income, right? And so you could just as easily see it the other way. Instead of the question of do you want to implement a basic income, you could also ask, do you not want to implement a basic income, right? And at that point, it would be the opposite. So, like, in a 50% rule like situation, right? If you're asking, like, do you want to not implement the basic income, or even an 80% rule or whatever. If you ask the question, do you want to not implement a basic income, then you'll have, for instance, you'll have 76% of the population saying we do not want the basic income. But if you've got an 80% rule, then you're going to get the 24% that do want the basic income. They're going to get it, right? Because you just need 80% of the people to agree on do you not want a basic income for that to pass. And so that's why, to me, it doesn't make sense to have anything other than a 50% threshold, because basically it just, depending on how you word it, it would be the very opposite, right? If you word it like, do you want a basic income? Then 76% of the people say no. If you say do you not want a basic income, then 76% of the population say yes. And so you're gonna get different results based on that. Whereas if it's a 50%, then you're gonna get the same result, right? So this is why to me it makes sense to have a 50% threshold, and just to have direct democracy. I like it because that way people directly get to vote on issues, and you don't have this issue of like politicians not respecting the will of their constituency and people feeling alienated from the political process and all that. And if you still have a constitution that says that you're not allowed to discriminate against any particular group, then you still address that issue. And I think that is what I favor. So I really favor the Swiss system, and it's not just out of out of nationalism for Switzerland. I really don't care about that. It's really just I like the system. It works well. There's a lot less political, stupid political polarization like we're seeing in the United States. And people are not being oppressed by sort of mob majority rule. So yeah, that's my position.
Just give me 1 second to write something.
Yeah. Sorry, I know I said a lot. I know I said a lot. Ex-pagan, no UBI but cute welfare. That's the opposite. Welfare precisely ends up having people stay unemployed because they paid more than they did to work. With UBI, everybody gets the UBI, and then you just, whatever you earn from work, you get on top of the UBI. So that is why UBI has much less of this issue of a disincentive to work. Yeah, welfare for unemployment is very much a problem, and I don't support it. It's stigmatizing to people who are unemployed. It requires the government to means test and to snoop in to see whether a person really deserves it or not. Um, so so yeah, but you got to do something, right? If people aren't employed and you're not, do you want to literally let them starve? No, UBI is great. UBI gives people freedom. Um, you're not robbing the labor of others. This is one thing you got to understand. Capitalism and Ibn Tal recognizes this. Capitalism does not reward you for your work. That is like a lie. Okay, it does not. No, it does not reward you for your work. The market economies do not reward you for your work. They reward you for your market value, but that is not your work. People get paid huge amounts of money for not working any harder than the average person, right? Um, yeah, +1. Um, it's about value, not hard work, and it's about value, not hard work. So you're not robbing their labor. You're not robbing their labor, and so this is why. So Ibn Tal thinks it's okay to be about value, okay, and uh, my point is that it's not okay. But as a result, because it's not okay, precisely because you are unfairly rewarded in a market economy, then that means that you can actually also take away the income because it is unfair income, right? It's not an income that you sort of inherently deserve, okay? It's an income that you get. It's an income that you get. It's not an income you deserve. So as a result, it's also okay to remove some of the income from people. Um, I don't actually like capitalism. I said capitalism. I don't. I prefer to refer to the kind of economies that we have not as capitalism, but rather as private enterprise market economies. I think it's capitalism just focuses on one aspect of such economies. I don't actually I don't like it because it focuses on the idea of capital and capital accumulation, and it's really not the only thing. There are other really important things, and so I don't like the term capitalism actually. Um, So yeah, in a private enterprise market economy, what we refer to as capitalism, you end up. I say I wouldn't say that trust, reputation, relationships, networks, evolution, sales, etc. are undeserving forms of value. They're skills that ensure that useful things actually get done. You can't discount those skills because they're the most valuable. Of course they're useful. It's my point. My point is that you don't. It, it's that if you have those skills, it, like you don't necessarily deserve to have them, right? Maybe you're born smarter than other people. You don't deserve to have more money because you're born smarter, right? That's not fair. Um, Likewise, maybe you ended up in a position that enabled you to like have these skills, maybe through luck or because people like you or something. That again is not, it's not deserved, right? So my point is I believe in equality between people, right? Equality of treatment regardless of whether you're smart or skilled or not. And so then for me, like a fair treatment would be everybody, it's what do I say, it's like effort compensated, um effort compensated egalitarianism. So like ideally you would only reward people for labor. From a purely egalitarian perspective, you'd only reward people for labor. Um, and because what I believe in is, yeah, equality of treatment, but obviously if somebody works, then that is a loss for that person, right? You could say it's if a person works, it's kind of as if they had a loss of some sort of worth, right? They lose the value of not working. You see what I mean? They lose their own subjective well-being that comes from not working if they work. So then you've got to compensate that loss of subjective well-being of idleness. You compensate it through income. That is the yeah, good looking and tall men get to be CEOs. That's kind of true. Yeah. um, that's what transhumanism is for. Capitalism is the fastest way to get to transhumanism. If you want equality, you should support transhumanism. And if you want transhumanism, you have to be capitalist. Equality cannot be achieved until we have transhumanism. I agree. I agree. Yeah, I agree. When you play Cyberpunk, I think it's Ethiopia. Before transhumanism, tall, beautiful people will always win. No way to stop that. Yeah, yeah, I know, I know. I know we can't have equality. So my point is, ideally, it's sort of from my perspective, you would do it like I said. But the thing is, that would completely crash the economy because then you couldn't have any form of passive income. And like one of the very the crucial elements of the economy is, as we saw, is investment, right? Investment is inherently it's passive income, which means you don't work for it. But ideally, like I said, you wouldn't actually earn anything from investment because you don't have to work for it. But as we like, obviously, the economy wouldn't work properly if you didn't have that. So in fact, unfortunately, we need some unfairness for the economy to function and for everybody to be better off, right? Because you need to be able to reward the investor, and we need to, and because of that, we need to accept that there is going to be some amount of passive income, some amount of unearned income. You say there's not going to be rich, yeah, but you don't need rich transhumanists and poor transhumanists. You have everybody be transhumanistic, and by that time, anyway, what I support is then just having automation of all production. So you just have machines and robots doing all the production, and then everybody just lives off of a UBI. That is my sort of end goal, and it should be everyone's. I think that to me that's the obvious that's the obvious solution in the long run. Um, uh, I don't know if you kind of agree with that, Eventel. And then you could actually have robots themselves act as if they were in a market economy, right? You could maybe have robots pretend that they were trying to sell stuff, and compete against one another. Um, so you say the difference is that if you fail at life when we're transhuman, it'll not be because of genetics giving you a bad hand. It'll actually be based on your own merit. See, but yeah, this is maybe where we differ because because you believe in the Ayn Rand's objectivist philosophy, and that one of the fundamental principle is that like your goal of life is to be productive. Um, and for me, that's not the case at all. For me, the goal in life is simply to experience well-being, and that is not contingent on productivity. And I would say actually that is very much something that people are misled into. Okay, so you say the goal of life is happiness, not productivity, but I get the impression that Ayn Rand said that productivity gives you happiness. Objectivism says the goal of life is happiness, and I agree with that. But I get the impression also that it tends to kind of assume that you will be happy through your productivity. Um,
Well, I guess let's finish off the Republican talk first. So
Sure.
just something I want to comment on. You said something along the lines of, if you have a constitution which says that people can't discriminate and so on, then voting will be fine, even if it's a 50% majority or less than that or whatever. I strongly disagree.
But did you sort of understand my argument about saying that any decision should also be conceived as the opposite of that decision? Like, it shouldn't be, should we introduce a UBI only, but also you should also ask the other question, should we not introduce a UBI? And to me, those are equivalent propositions, and you shouldn't give one more weight than the other based on what currently is the situation, right? So you shouldn't make it harder to change the status quo than to keep it. To me, it's a decision. It's an equivalent decision. To me, it's like the trolley problem. Do you know the trolley problem? You know, the people on 2 train tracks. Yeah. I mean, you know how that works. And to me, the answer is you should give equal equal value to the choice of not flipping the switch or of flipping it. You see, to me, like, I don't think that a passive choice, a choice of inaction, is less of a choice. And so what I'm saying is that, to me, you should obviously divert the train to hit the one person instead of the 5 people. And so likewise, when it comes to like implementing a new law, so like if we asked, do we want to implement UBI, it shouldn't be considered somehow more of a choice to implement it when you don't have it than to just keep not having it. To me, it should be equivalent. So I don't see why we should have a stricter threshold for implementing something that doesn't exist than keeping unimplemented something that doesn't exist. See, that was my logic for saying that you should have a 50% threshold and not another threshold. And I think you're probably not going to change my mind, but I understand where you're coming from, but this is the way I see it. Yeah.
Sure. So, to respond, yes, I see the arguments you're constructing, but I'm not. I understand that you're trying to characterize it as, something like action is a choice, but inaction is also a choice. I would like to reframe. I understand the arguments you're making, but I don't think that's the correct lens to see it through.
Okay.
I would say that when you're talking about legislation, you're talking about a change, and I guess your fundamental statements as well. It shouldn't be so easy to resist change, but actually that's the whole intention of a republic, right? That the minority has the ability, has an actual solid and pretty a pretty usable tool to resist change, because you don't know. It is very difficult to interpret and impose some sort of a principle which you can depend on, which will ensure that all legislation can be understood in a particular way by everyone involved, to ensure that all people will agree on the effects, the ultimate effects of legislation or whatever. And in many cases, a particular minority will see the effects of some legislation and what its effects on them will be, negative, positive, whatever. And that tool to be able to resist the legislation and shake it off that easily is useful to minorities, right? And there's no way for you to know, for the society at large to always know whatever, but the minority might really have a good insight, and it's useful to have. So it's not about whether or not, it's not about the fact that choosing not to pass legislation is also an action. It's about choosing whether or not a change should occur.
Yeah, but why?
That is useful.
What you're doing is that you're valuing the status quo. In that sense, you're being a conservative in a very, just a descriptive sense. You're valuing. You think there's more value to keeping the status quo than to changing it, because you could also make an argument, for instance, that there, many people, or even a majority in this case, that is being hurt by the status quo, right? But because because a minority of people is able to impede change, as a result, we're not going to eliminate the bad status quo. So I get the feeling that this kind of reasoning is a very conservative reasoning, right? It tends to assume that change is more of a problem than keeping a bad status quo.
Okay. So I see what you're saying. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So the reason you say it's implicitly conservative, not in the sense that I just preserve the status quo um, blindly, but rather that um, it's based on the assumption that the Constitution was the principles that were adopted in the Constitution were good principles. If that assumption is incorrect, then then there is another outlet which will usually end up causing change anyway. That's usually revolution of some kind.
Yeah.
So
But
you know,
oh wait, but it's not just it doesn't just assume that it's the Constitution that is a good principle. It's also assuming that all the other laws that are in place, so also just the the corpus of like legislative legislation that you have, non-constitutional legislation that you have, is also good, right? Because what you're saying precisely is that's also hard to change non-constitutional legislation, right? So you're basically assuming that everything that starts off everything good, and then most changes are presumably not going to be so good. I think it does still assume that, and that would be my objection
yes,
to your position there. Yeah, yeah,
yes, that is the assumption. The assumption is that the founding document
yeah.
is sufficiently good that changes, whatever changes do occur, should be supported by a broad consensus. That is the assumption, absolutely.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if the
yeah.
assumption is broken and you just have a crappy constitution, then well, that just has to be removed by revolution. That's just how it
Yeah.
has to be.
Yeah, okay, but
That's the assumption.
like I said, it's not, you're assuming that not just the Constitution is good, but also all the other legislation that you have, right? Like the civil code and whatever, the penal code and all that. You're assuming that all that is good too, because your system makes it a lot harder to change that as well. Not just harder to change the Constitution, but to change all those things too.
Yes, yes. The reason I keep talking about it in terms of the Constitution is that it.
Oh,
Oh, sorry. I thought you were saying something.
no,
Sorry.
no.
The reason I keep talking in terms of whether or not the Constitution is a good starting point is that you would expect that if it is difficult to change legislation, and non-constitutional legislation is not permitted to enter, then all legislation that the body of legislation is going to match the Constitution within some parameters. So I guess I keep talking about it in terms of that assumption, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah, okay. Okay. So, yeah, I can see what you're saying too. I guess my reasoning is that I would have a constitution basically where the really the most important principles, like if like I told you, I've been thinking about what I would do for for a constitution as well. And I would have just quite limited, like you look at the US Constitution, it's quite limited. I wouldn't even have the kind of things that they have there. I wouldn't actually have a strict constitution, as detailed a constitution regarding the system of government. Like it wouldn't say exactly, the Senate is made like this and then our House of Representatives is like this and such. I wouldn't do it like that. I'll just say there needs to be democracy with some sort of representative democracy, some sort of direct democracy too, because I like that. So but I wouldn't it wouldn't be in the Constitution to say exactly how, because I think there isn't a perfect system of that. And as we can see, that we've got different types of democracies, and we've got good outcomes with different types of democracies. You've got good, well-functioning countries with different types of democracies. So that's why I wouldn't put in the Constitution. The only thing I put in the Constitution is really the stuff that wouldn't be okay to be any different. So I would actually leave lots of latitude. So like I've said, I believe in very much in fairness and limiting inequality, and also just ensuring that everybody can survive. So this is why I would actually put basic income and an income cap and wealth cap into the Constitution. Unless somehow we could demonstrate that the economy would just be destroyed if we did that, or something like that. But otherwise, yeah, I think that should be in the Constitution. And just again, there should be a clause against discrimination. There should be like that should be in the Constitution, and there should also be again a thing against actual physical harm to people. So again, a rule against torture and death penalty. And I think that's pretty much the only thing I would put in the Constitution. Beyond that, I would just leave it up to the people to decide what's best, and leave it to majority rule at that point, because the essentials are covered at that point. For me, that's the way I see it. The essentials are covered, and to me, then it doesn't really matter if people do whatever they do, and if it's sort of mob rule, it won't matter, because the things that matter most are those things that I listed there. And so yeah, that's my position. And that way, to me, it's more fair. Like I think it should be majority rule. I think it's the most fair way to do things, as long as you're sure that whatever gets done isn't going to be terrible, right?
Sure. So I think we had it was three different goals. I think the first one was to determine, whether or not we can agree that there is a distinction, a valuable, well, not even valuable, a substantive distinction between republics and democracies. I don't know if you agree. Republics are a different thing from democracies, and they are opposed to forms of government.
Again,
Do you see?
I see what you mean. I see what you mean, but I'm also seeing that lots of people typically would classify a democracy and a republic as being largely synonymous, and also or a democracy being a type of republic. And to me, that still makes more sense to do it like that. But I see what you mean by your version of a republic. I understand what you're talking about, and what I would say is that you could call it. I would call that what you call a republic. I would call it a constitutional democracy, um, mostly, and also like a consensus. Yeah, I wouldn't call it republic. What your thing, I would actually just have a more descriptive term instead of something short like republic. I would say like, uh, consensus based, yeah, consensus based constitutional democracy, something like
You
that.
you could just call it the rule of law, the rule of a publicly published body of law. That's what it is.
Yeah,
That's really all it is.
yeah.
Or we could call it
Yeah, I see
separation
what.
of powers. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you mean. I see what you mean by that too. But it's not just the rule of law, right? Because you can also change things. So it's not just that. You could that, and that's why I say constitutional, right? Basically, in the word constitutional refers to that, and then the consensus based is on the stuff that you and then end up changing, right? All the new legislation and stuff, the new executive orders and stuff that get done. That is the sort of the where I talk about the consensus based. So that is consensus based, and then constitutional refers to the rule of law. So it's consensus based constitutional democracy. I would prefer to refer to that. That way I know what I'm talking about. Republic to me is kind of vague. It's like these words like socialism that are, that have different meanings to different people. But yeah, I definitely understand what you mean. I definitely understand that. Yeah, a consensus based constitutional democracy is different from a non-constitutional majority rule democracy. Yeah, yeah. That is the way I would say it, but you can say it that way, the way you say it too. Yeah.
Sure. And just something to remember, when you talk about rule of law or republicanism, you're automatically talking about the separation of powers.
Okay.
So, you know, our republic is the separation of powers. It is a constitution and the separation of powers, which ensures that the constitution remains the law, or remains the governing principle, as opposed to the whim of some group.
Yeah,
Now,
that's where I don't necessarily agree, because etymologically, I wouldn't say that republic actually means that, and I like to have sort of definitions that kind of fit the etymology. You see, and that's why I'm not necessarily a fan of that kind of definition of republicanism, and also because, like, as we've seen, basically we consider a place like Switzerland to be, or any place that doesn't have a constitution. The UK actually doesn't really have a constitution. So, and that of course is a monarchy too. But if we ignore the monarchic aspect, then we could call it. It would be, in my, in the expanded definition, it would be a republic. Um, and of course a place, again, like a place like France, like whatever, Switzerland, whatever, that these places are also republics. And any non-monarchy, actually, any non-monarchy or non-autocracy, uh, in my way of seeing it, would be a republic. And in lots of ways, in fact, for instance, the Wikipedia article, that was how they defined it. So again, these are very different definitions, and I think it's important to understand this, that it's like socialism, right? And so yeah, and so ex-pagan says, I think you just don't want the name to republic. No, what I don't want is other systems, like for instance the kind of system that I'm advocating for, to not be called a republic. This the things that basically Ibn Tal's definition of a republic excludes the kind of system that I would be advocating for, and as it also excludes lots of lots of current government systems that we have in various independent states in the world. And I kind of prefer more inclusive definition that pretty much encompasses all democracies. But I do also, of course, understand what you're saying, Ibn Tal, and so yeah.
Okay, I can understand your position. I just want to push back very slightly a little further, and then I'll back off. So understand this: my usage of the term republic is the usage of the term republic, which was, has been entirely the properly understood meaning up until about not more than 100 years ago, right? So
Okay.
the founding fathers used the term republic the same way I'm using it now, and that's
Okay.
why if you look at their quotes and all that, they're talking about republics versus democracies, and they talk about how democracy destroys a republic, republics are meant
Yeah.
to resist democracy,
Yeah.
and so on. All that that is the proper understanding that's been
Okay. Well, yeah.
ascribed to since Rome all the way up to then the
Well, they said it.
1770s.
They're saying that in Rome, the republic wasn't apparently even used as a, or they say no, republicanism apparently wasn't used. It's not even clear if the word republic was actually used in Rome. You must know. I mean, I don't actually know. Maybe it was, but it seems like, and it certainly it wasn't used in Greece, right? Since those are Latin words. But yeah, yeah. Okay, like definitely if it's been used like since, the the Renaissance or something, then then yeah, potentially. I still am not a fan of the fact that it wasn't used etymologically. I mean, that doesn't really fit the etymology, right? Because literally it just means public affair, right? It just means public
No,
affair. I mean,
remember that these people
etymologically. You see what I mean?
Remember that these people, these thinkers, they were coming from Europe, where you had, the Merovingian kings, the right of the king to rule, and you
Yeah,
had all these other forms of government, which were
yeah,
not, where law was not a public affair. Law
yeah,
was the whim of the ruler, the
yeah,
ruling
yeah.
class, whether,
Absolutely.
that's the nobles or the king, or it was, the lord or whoever it was. And it's not, there's no public published body. It's just, the king, when he gets a new vaps, he just catch a vaps, and a spirit takes him, and he says, okay, tell the town crier tomorrow, you go out and you say, hear ye, the king desires greatly now that, by order
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
king, at sundown today, the new law is this, and that's it.
yeah,
There's no published document. It's not a
yeah,
public affair.
yeah,
It's the whim that inhabits the mind of the ruling class. That's
yeah,
it.
yeah.
And
Exactly.
so, as
But
they saw it,
mhm.
they call it a public thing because, you know, it was a publicly published document as opposed to the private whims.
Yeah, but so are you like familiar with this change in definition of a republic? Because like I said, we've got these definitions which now uh apparently where republic is a term that's just used to encompass also just any kind of democracy. Do you know like any like specific scholars who introduced maybe this kind of different definition? Or are you aware about that since you seem to know quite a lot of these things? Do you know about any of that?
I haven't taken the time to trace, I have sort of taken the time to trace when the change began to occur, which
Okay.
is around the beginning of around the end of the 1800s to the beginning
Yeah.
of the 1900s.
Yeah.
I don't know why that happened or whatever, but up to
Okay.
like the end of the 1800s, it was well and commonly understood that republic referred to a nation body governed by a publicly published document,
Mhm.
and that was the law. It was the rule of that. That was up until just
Mhm.
the late 1800s. That was the way it was.
Okay. Okay. Well, fair enough. Okay, so I don't know about the specifics of these things as well as you do. So, okay,
Something
if you're using that definition, then sure, sure.
it's similar to the word totalitarianism, right?
Mhm.
Totalitarianism is actually a word that was invented by Goebbels.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so all of its history, it referred to, as Goebbels described it. It is when the totality of the energies of the people are directed toward the central plan of the state, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it's called totalitarianism. The totality of the energies of the people are directed toward a central plan or a central direction.
Yeah. Yeah. Um.
S- Yeah.
Yeah. This is interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that this was. I didn't know this was. Okay, wait. Uh. Apparently here, so again, I'm just using Wikipedia. I know it's not, but then it has its own sources, but It says here is actually formulated in 1923 by Giovanni Amendola, who described Italian fascism as a system which was fundamentally different from conventional dictatorships. So they say, so Giovanni Gentile, Italia's most prominent philosopher and leading theorist of fascism, used the term totalitario to refer to the structure and goals of the new state, which was to provide the total representation of the nation and total guidance of national goals. Yeah, so okay, so here they're saying it's not Goebbels, but it's from that time kind of. So yeah, definitely it
Sure.
refers to that kind of.
I may have got the ideologue wrong. The source I read, I'm pretty sure that I remember it having stated it was
Yeah, look, this might
Goebbels.
be
I could
wrong
be
too,
wrong.
right? This Wikipedia can't be wrong, so you might be right. You might be right. But although,
But
yeah,
just in general, so
yeah,
the way
right.
people use the word totalitarian today is they think it just means any authoritarian system or any system where there's a dictator on top, which is not necessarily true. Totalitarianism refers to a centrally planned economy which has become sufficiently command controlled that all of the private energies of the private sector, there is no longer a private sector. All of the energies of the people are directed toward a central plan.
Yeah.
And you can't have, say, for example, Britain being a very liberal state where you have a head of state, even before Britain to her powers to the parliament, when she actually was a monarch, Britain was still fairly liberal. And it wasn't totalitarian, it wasn't centrally planned, but there was a monarch, that kind of thing, right? Totalitarianism doesn't refer to merely the existence of an autocrat.
Yeah, but then you could also argue that the economy in Nazi Germany was mostly private, right? The companies were still private. They're supposed to act, and they did. They sort of coerced into acting according to the desires of the Nazi Party. But I mean, so in that sense, it is totalitarian, yes. But at the same time, it still was private, and it's still, they still kind of were able to do what they wanted to, even though like they didn't, because obviously they knew they'd get sanctions if they didn't respond to the desires of the state. So yeah, I mean, you could definitely call it totalitarian, but I think it's important, for instance, to understand that's not exactly a centrally planned economy either. All right, I mean, there's sort of some goals and stuff, but it's not like the Soviet model.
I guess sort of trying to refer to the way the meaning of the word as it's used just sort of changed, and I don't really know when
so
that change occurred.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and so what are you saying? So how actually did the change? How did it happen? Like what has it now like in comparison? So what you're basically saying is that totalitarianism, it used to refer to that, I don't know, this idea that like it meant maybe like the Giovanni Gentile thing here, where like the goals of the new state is to provide total representation of the nation, total guidance of national goals. And now it's kind of just used to refer to more like authoritarianism, right? I guess that's what you're saying, right? And that is sort of again, I don't know exactly how that changed, but maybe scholars still refer to totalitarianism in the more original sense of just referring to this fact that about trying to. But in any case, it already kind of, even in Giovanni Gentile's definition, you can see. I mean, if the state has a total guidance of national goals, presumably that's kind of authoritarian, right? So in that sense, I don't think the definition has changed as much as, for instance, with republic, and which also makes sense because it's a younger term, so it has had less time to change as well.
And just as a passing thing about Germany, during the time that Germany did have some elements of totalitarianism. For example, there was actually in the German private life, they used to schedule a lot of elements of the way German people lived, and they actually had, for example, the shaping of the use of the people's free time. There was actually a term. It literally means the shaping of the use of the use made of the people's free time. That's Freigestaltung.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
But you can see that. I mean, obviously, like it wasn't socialism, right? It called itself National Socialism, but it wasn't actually socialism. I mean, it was state. There's definitely lots of state interference, but it was still a different model from actual socialism. I would say, yeah.
Actually, I don't want to comment on that because
Oh,
I
you don't want to
don't
comment?
know enough. Yeah,
Oh,
I
really?
don't know
Okay.
enough about I don't know enough about Nazi Germany. Surprisingly,
Okay.
at the economic level, I
Okay.
have yet to actually study it properly. So yeah.
Okay. All right. That would I would just wanted to say that just because of the retention of private companies. So private, from what I know, it's just that it was basically private company. This government would give sort of broad outlines of what it wanted the private companies to do, but then the companies would end up deciding the specifics themselves. Whereas in an actual socialist economy, it's really just the central planners that decide everything. So for me, that is why I would call that not actual socialism. And in fact, well, we know also that the Nazi regime persecuted communist socialists and all that, and it was very quick to do so. In fact, it's the first people that it attacked even before the Jews. So that also is maybe an argument that it wasn't socialist. So yeah. Um, but okay, if you don't want to talk about that, we won't talk about.
No problem, no problem. And so I guess that concludes the whole thing about republics versus democracies, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess you can see I don't actually think there should be direct democracy. I'm pretty much against it. I'm very afraid of it. Yeah. So
Yeah. I'm seeing it again. I think you shouldn't be because, like, again, Switzerland is doing all right, I think, and so I don't think you should be afraid of it. I mean, I think if you don't think it's the best system, okay, fair enough. But um, I don't think it's something to really be afraid of. I mean, obviously it can work, and I mean it's so yeah. But I understand that you might not prefer it. Yeah. Okay. Do you I don't know. Do you want to leave it at that at this point? Do you want to just
I can't think of anything else, to bring up. And I think it's best that you set the topic for your stream. So, maybe I'll sort of bid you an adieu for now.
No, yeah, sure. All right. Well, thanks for the chat again. Thanks for coming back for the second day and for participating also here. All right.
Sure.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. There we go. It wasn't national as well. Hitler was Jewish. Well, it didn't. Yeah, he had like a little bit of like Jewish ancestry or something apparently, right? Um. What do I think about Frankism and its effect on world politics? I'm not sure it had that much effect. Do you think it had that much effect on world politics? Um, I don't like Franco because it was, sort of, right-wing economically and sort of traditionalism and, clericalism and all of that. I don't like Franco. Definitely am not a fan of Franco. Um, I'm not convinced I think it wasn't really particularly a regime that inspired other places all that much. I don't really feel it's had that much effect elsewhere. I feel so yeah. Um, this is not Frankism. You don't mean like from Franco? You mean like being what do you mean? Is that not Franco? Like okay. And then I don't know what it is. But yeah, because like it wouldn't be with a K if it was if it was Franco, right? It would be like QUI. It would be QUI. It's a very big sect that became political. So then it's what? It's like based on Frank, like the Franks, like like the monarchists, Franks, on the is that something like that? Oh, it's based on Jacob Frank, a heretical Sabbatean Jewish religious movement of the 18th and 19th centuries, centered on the leadership of the Jewish Messiah claimant Jacob Frank. Okay. He rejected religious norms. He lived from 1726 to 1791. His followers were obligated to transgress as many moral boundaries as possible. As Heidegger claimed perhaps 50,000 followers. Okay, so this kind of explained why I maybe hadn't heard of it. Primarily Jews living in Poland and other parts of Eastern Europe. Okay. How the heck do you guys know about this? Like, this seems like a pretty, like, it doesn't have many pages. It doesn't even have, like, a page in French. Okay, so he says that you have to transgress all boundaries. I doubt that Frankism had a big influence since it only had like 50,000 followers. And it was like just a sort of Jewish thing. I doubt it had really much influence. So they had orgies and stuff. So this is I guess what I imagine is that all these people who are worried about like Jewish conspiracy theories see this kind of thing as then that brings them to all this sort of satanic pedophile reptilian stuff, right? This is what it's about, right? This is what you're talking about. Okay. Okay. Man, so it's this sort of weird it's these weird Jewish conspiracy theory things. I'm not really interested in this shit. Why don't you discuss Frankism QUI instead? Is it this?
Independent news talk network in the Middle East, Israel National Radio and IsraelNationalRadio.com present The Tamar Yonah Show. Here's Tamar Yonah.
And welcome to the show this Tuesday, June 20th, 2006, or the 24th of Sivan, 5766 on the Hebrew calendar. Hi, everybody, and hello to all of our listeners down in southern Florida. The Tamar Yonah Show is also syndicated on www.kolhalev.com. A very, 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 very special guest today in the studio with me, not just on the phone. And I know that he's got a lot of groupies, people worship this guy, and he really merits it. I have joining me today Dr. and Rabbi Marvin.
Jeez, I'm not even sure. This might violate Twitch terms of service, actually. I'm gonna close this shit down. Yeah, we're gonna get a fucking TOS. We're about to get the Twitch content Monka TOS strike. Yeah, Monka S strike. Yeah. Monka TOS. Monka TOS strike. Yeah. This is just weird. This is just weird shit. I don't want to discuss this weird Jewish conspiracy. This stuff I'm not interested. I literally just go or stay, but not this shit. Not this shit. Law, truth, yeah, truth. Right, truth. Just let's talk about something else, not Jewish conspiracy theories. I don't want that. I don't want that. Okay, because I'm part of the Jewish conspiracy theory. Okay, and I'm literally just right now. I just drank some blood from my baby, and I'm just feeling a bit full, and I'm feeling it might make me throw up if I think about it too much. So, Fat Earth pill too. What's the Fat Earth pill? Yeah. I don't know. I'm just, and I'm not really supposed to talk about it, but I just talk about it all the time anyway because I love talking about the fact that I'm a satanic Jew, and so I'm next week I'm gonna have a ritual sacrifice of a goyim, but of a goyim. But yeah, this is gonna be it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. Lots of orgying and just the general like Jewish debauchery. Sticking like the Star of David up people's asses and stuff. That just the usual. Um, we already had that last month here. It was fun. I was with George Soros and well, no, not we saw George Soros on uh on Zoom, and there's George Soros' son with us. We had a nice feast of Christian babies. So yeah, yeah. But you wanted to, so I'm just not a fan because they told me I'm not supposed to talk about it. But if you want, I can talk about it a bit more. I don't know. Would you like to? But only if you promise not to tell anyone. Only if you promise not to send some of this stuff to like to the Twitch mods. But yeah, and we next year they said they'd take me on a they said okay, yeah, okay. So next week they're gonna not I mean next year, sorry. They said, because with Elon Musk has been there's this lots of speculation about development of spaceships and stuff, and also now that we've seen with Jeff Bezos, right, the spaceship flight, but what we don't know is what they actually did up in space, and actually there's much speculation, uh, and of course that is from your perspective that is speculation, but in fact, what happened is that they had to get replenish that what the actual purpose of this was to bring back a precious energy stone to the spaceship that is posted over Earth by the reptilians, and so the they had to take back this thing for the spaceship to work properly. It had been brought down to Earth to assist the construction of various monuments, for energy sort of control purposes on Earth. But now it needs to go back to the spaceship because the spaceship otherwise won't be able to function properly. And so yeah, you remember that they zapped various forests to cause wildfires, and they do lots of other interference as well. And so yeah, they said I might actually be able, if I progress in the circle, and I keep following the rituals, and especially if I actually bring them uh, a special kind of virgin child for the sacrifice. If I actually do that, then they might let me actually go on board the spaceship, which would of course be really, really wonderful. So. Yeah, I think that's gonna be fun. I'm really looking forward to that, going onto the spaceship. So, I think it's gonna be fun. And so now in um in 5 years from now, they're planning to take over the world through the New World Order. Through they're gonna release a second COVID-like virus from we don't know where exactly, but there's going to be another COVID-like virus, which is going to be a lot more deadly, and that is going to then justify much more government restrictions. And they're going to hand out a vaccine, which is going to seem like it's not very lethal at all, but then it's going to be way more lethal. Um, it's going to be way, way more lethal. But it's only has a delayed side effects, so people they're like going to die from the vaccine, but like only only a few years, or not even years, but a few months after, like, and certainly like it'll get everybody vaccinated very quickly, and then people only then will start having the side effects, and that is going to cool lots of the human population and leave much more room for the Jews. So this is what we're gonna do. This is the plan, and this is gonna be pretty fun. So I've spoken already with Rabbi Shlomo, and he says that he's pretty confident that this is gonna work. And so um, the plan is to eliminate three-quarters of the world population, and then to enslave the rest, and mostly to breed them for the perspective of eternal youth. and yeah, to take back the Jewish homeland. Of course, we'll especially we'll be focusing on regaining the Jewish homeland. But in fact, it's the entire Earth, right? That is the Jewish homeland. So we're going to just convert. It's going to be just the Jewish Earth, right? And of course the Jewish spaceship as well. And not just Jewish, of course. Then it's then it's going to be shared with our reptilian friends from well, now they've actually colonized several star systems. Originally they're from Epsilon Eridani. Now they've also colonized a planet around Alpha Centauri. So they've taken quite a few places. The Jews for now are still limited to Earth, although they've apparently taken a few of our rabbis all the way to Alpha Centauri, and apparently that was quite amazing for them. But yeah, I mean, I'd really love to do that too. I mean, honestly, see another star system. Yeah, seriously. Yeah, also that. Yeah, in fact. And so yeah, this is the plan. So I'm just telling you this because, like, for now, like, there's not much you can do about it, really. Um, the Jews already control everything, so we control everything. As you can see, Sirius Ashkenazi. Yeah. Um, and so I'm just here sort of to tease you, basically. Just come here to tease you and to just kind of to 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 see how you react to this. And well, also because then, I mean, I won't be, you won't be there to be teased. Pretty soon it's going to be curtains for you. Probably not necessarily, or I mean, either you won't be there, or you'll just be one of our slaves for the Jews. So yeah, unless you're Jewish yourself, of course. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I don't know everybody who comes. I don't know all Jews. That's obviously. Um, there's a lot of us, lot of people who pretend not to be Jews but actually are Jewish. So yeah, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, the long-term population goal is, others have said it's 500 million, but that's not true. It's actually 2 billion. And the reason for that is we need still quite a few people to be our slaves. We need to have proper economic productivity. We want to have lots of people to be slaves. So as a result of that, we need to like we need to keep more than just 500 million. So that's wrong. If you heard 500 million, that's disinformation. The target is like I said, we get rid of 3/4 of the population. So the target is 2 billion people. If it makes it sound ridiculous, it means it won't happen. They totally didn't try it already. What do you mean? What do you mean if it makes it sound ridiculous, it means it won't happen? They totally didn't try it already. Why do you think it sounds ridiculous? I'm just telling you, it's like the Glee. Haven't you ever seen, like, in these movies where there's the villain that's about to, like, kill the someone, and he explains exactly what he's doing. Communism was such a project. Um, yeah, well, this is the project now, right? This is the project now. And this is what QAnon has tried to be warning you about, but QAnon didn't get the proper full story. Did I ever have a job in my life? No, I didn't need to. I was just paid by the reptilian Jewish government. Uh-oh. It says I've got 0 viewers. Bye just reported you. What are you talking about? Yeah, okay. I see that it says, like, literally. Are you who the fuck is this person? And why did the fuck did you report me? Okay. Why does it say I have 0 viewers? Jesus. This is a problem. Twitch is way too twitchy, Twitch is, like, way too uppity about this kind of thing. Mate says you have 5 for what? What does that mean? What does that mean? 5 for me? What does that mean? Oh, it says, oh really? Why does it say 0? This is worrying. This is worrying. I really got to see if I can find myself. Okay, politics. Politics, here we go. M is my channel. Jesus, they hid me. Look at this. They've hid me. Fuck. Fuck. Okay, since you don't want to talk about history, why do you think direct democracy is not widespread? I don't think anyone should below 30 shouldn't speak. I think, well, when you look at it, it's actually the older people. The older they are, the more idiotic they seem to be. So, I kind of disagree. Okay, 5 years, good. Okay, so it got like temporarily frozen or something. Do I appear when I say it? Yeah, 5 years. Okay, now I've got 5 years. This is a problem. This is a problem when I talk about our evil plans. I would say the voting age should be restricted to under 35 pluses, because then they all just turn into ultra chuds beyond that age, basically. So yeah, I could limit it to under 35s. You support Trump? Yeah, of course. Of course you'd say, yeah. You complete orc. Look at that shit. Yeah, oh, I'm 28. Yeah, I don't want to pay 90% of my salary in taxes. But if you're one of these people that like literally Trump supporters are just a complete joke. Trump supporters are such a fucking joke. Like you literally think that Trump is a person of the people, man of the people. Like lol. Fucking billionaire who never had to work in his life, who did work but basically got bankrupt, who didn't, avoided the draft with foot spurs. But no, this is your all-American hero, right? John McCain got fucking war hero and everything, got shot down or whatnot. you know. But meanwhile, no, it's like no, it's Trump. Trump, the fucking lazy coastal elite billionaire that just does everything it can to hurt everyone but his buddy billionaires. But no, he's the one who's like saving America. well, well. No, I can't. At this point, I have to stop talking about it. You see how Twitch is actually, it's not letting us. It's probably because I was talking too much, and it's probably the people in, it's probably, Rabbi Ariel actually that like maybe said it, because he's on. I think he is able to limit lots of the stuff. I mean, not directly, but his employees or whatever. So I gotta stop. My viewers are flagging my account. Who's flagging my account? Who are you flagging my account? I don't know who else would be flagging my account. Oh yeah, it's Evil Vortier. Okay, so yeah, this is this person. I've gotta ban that person and oops. Report. Okay, so yes, evildoer Voltaire here. Evildoer Voltaire. Okay, what the fuck is happening? Well, I got a sort of crazy person here who believes in this weird Jewish conspiracy theory stuff. So then I pretended that I was that, and I just sort of talked about sort of random shit that these people believe in. And yeah, there's a lull because I had to report somebody. So I had to basically ban and report evildoer Voltaire YT, and then I don't know if there's anybody else who's doing this. Is anybody else flagging my thing? Look at it. Okay. This is the problem that people they try to get you banned. It's funny how they complain. Oh, cancel culture. Oh, cancel culture. We can't say anything anymore. And then you say something and they cancel. What do you say from the earlier shit in chat? It looks crazy. What is the earlier shit in chat? Yeah, there's lots of crazy chat. There's lots of crazy shit in chat. I don't know what you were seeing. I don't know what you're looking at. There's been lots of weird shit, but this is good. I want to have a sort of diverse. I want to have diverse people. So yeah, hi. Anyway, hi, Robomax. Thanks for coming by. I am I into physics and the philosophy of science. Again, you probably know way more about me about everything. So like, yeah, thank you for not. You're no longer little shit. Okay, thanks for not reporting. So am I into physics and the philosophy of science? Uh, yeah, I mean, I've learned a bit of, basic physics. I like, the idea of the philosophy of science. I haven't read enormous stuff. I've read a couple things about like, the history of science and stuff. So I find that interesting. But it's true, I haven't. I mean, I don't know super much about it. If you want, we can look at that stuff. I don't know if you got something to suggest. Do you have anything you'd like to suggest? Um, let's see. Let's see. Okay, wait. I gotta check if I reappear, and otherwise, but yeah, we gonna. Okay, let's just see if I reappear. Do I appear? Do I appear? Yeah. Hey, hey, I'm the highest highest English speaking thing right now. Second highest politics. Oh. Hey, say no problem. I was wondering if a particular video series rabbit hole would interest me. Yeah, yeah, sure. If you've got one, yeah, you're an amateur philosopher. Yeah, I could say that too, but I have not. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Let's see. What I actually wanted to do is look up like some of the old like Greek philosophers right now, or just not just Greek, but like anything that doesn't have like restrictions. I don't know if you wanted to look about like Aristotle or something. I was looking at Aristotle here, and so they've got all these super great like stuff. Aristotle was a fucking genius, honestly. Um, and so yeah, so literally, um, F equals M times V. Okay, which is incorrect. So that would be, yeah. Okay, so let's see. He says V equals C times W over P. I'd have to look at that. The problem is it's two. Oh yeah, four causes. Material cause, formal cause, efficient cause, final cause. Um, yeah, this I don't really agree with. The four causes thing is interesting, but I don't actually agree with it. Thomas Paine. Okay, do you want to look at some Thomas Paine stuff? He's a genius. Yeah. Um, but like he was wrong about lots of stuff, right? But it's still pretty awesome. Um, and here he's followed a speed proportional to the weight and inversely proportional to the density of fluid they're immersed in. Um, yeah. Yeah. This is weird. So I should look it up more. I should look more into this. Geology. Yeah, he noticed that there's slow geological change. Yeah, there's lots of biology. He did lots of stuff on biology. I don't know if there's a good. Maybe I'll watch a video instead on Aristotle. I don't know. But it's actually faster for me, it's faster to read stuff just like this. I sort of skim it. It's it's kind of faster. Oh, he made substantial contribution to economics. Yeah. So his response to criticisms of private property in Lyle and Robbins' view anticipated later proponents of private property among philosophers and economists. Yeah. Offers the earliest accounts of the origins of money. Discussions on retail and interest. Yeah. So he had a low opinion of retail. He thought it was unnatural. He thought making a profit through interest unnatural. Yeah. So he gave a summary of the function of money, which was perhaps remarkably precocious. Rhetorics and poetics. Three basic kinds of appeals to persuade his audience: ethos, pathos, and logos. So speaker's character, appeal to audience emotion, appeal to logical reasoning. He did a ton of stuff. But I don't know if there's something in particular to like say. Ayn Rand's formulation of causality is better than Aristotle's. Aristotle was pretty groundbreaking for his time. What do you think? What do you think of Plato and Socrates? I mean, I think Plato was wrong about most stuff. I mean, he was interesting. I mean, he was an innovator, but I would say that he was like, by and large, well, already like he didn't think much of democracy. Like he actually literally thought aristocracy was the best form of government. And also there's like the quote like Platonic idealism and stuff, and there's they say Plato's a pioneer, and for that he was useful, but all his actual content was horrible. Yeah, I agree. Whereas Aristotle, like some of the content was good. Aristotle, like some of it was wrong, but I would say a lot of it was really good. Whereas like Plato's content was pretty shitty. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Okay, so some people think he was misogynistic, but actually not really, apparently. He said that there needs to be happiness. So this is like utilitarianism, apparently, if it's like that. I'd like to read some actual texts of Aristotle. What do you think of Socrates? I feel like Socrates didn't even. I remember him saying that he doesn't like. He actually, it's obvious, and he actually says it. Like he does. I don't. He says I don't even have any opinions of my own. I just spend my time kind of debunking other people's opinions. I feel like Socrates just kind of, he always just tries to sort of dismantle. He tries to dismantle other people's positions, and then Plato makes Socrates seem like smarter than like all the other people that he has discussions with. But in fact, it's not like it's that profound or anything. He sort of uses logic to show the inconsistencies of other people's beliefs. But it's like Socrates himself didn't necessarily have all that much of an opinion. It was useful that he centered and focused on conceptual clarity and defining terms. Yeah, that was useful. But like I feel like he doesn't have really much. I mean, he said this. I remember he said this himself, that he doesn't actually have much of an ideology himself. That was kind of my impression. Like it kind of seems like he almost just exists in opposition to other people. Like he can't really tell what he actually believes in. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I don't know. Do you want to read some Aristotle stuff? I sort of get sick of because like you see Socrates through Plato, and I get kind of sick of it. I read this Plato's like plays with Socrates and stuff, and it's just always this kind of same kind of shit. And like this is boring. What do you actually believe in? Stop having discussions with idiots and just trying to point their idiocy. Like after a while, we got it. But I'm probably not sort of properly analyzing the thing. But I prefer sort of more simple stuff. I'd prefer that Socrates would just like come and say, "I believe in these simple policies," and uh, and where can I works online, I'll say. Oh, it looks like everybody else is gone. Whoa, okay, so what we got here? I think I'll go. Well, this is the Constitution. Do you want to look at this? Okay, wait. So this is a discussion about the Constitution. So they were tried by court, impaneled from among the noble families, and sworn upon the sacrifices. The part of accusers was taken by Myron. They were found guilty of the sacrilege, and their bodies were cast out of their graves, and their race banished forevermore. In view of this expiation, Epimenides the Cretan performed purification of the city. So wait, why? It's like we're starting in mid thing because the initial part got lost. Is that it? Do you know this? After this event, there was a contention for a long time between the upper classes and populace. Not only was the constitution at this time oligarchical in every respect, but the poorer classes, men, women, and children, were the serfs of the rich. They were known as pelatai and also as hectemori because they cultivated the lands of the rich at the rent thus indicated. The whole country was in the hands of a few persons, and if the tenants failed to pay their rent, they were liable to be haled into slavery, and their children with them. All loans secured upon the debtor's person, a custom which prevailed until the time of Solon, who was the first to appear as the chantrums of the people. But the hardest and bitterest part of the constitution in the eyes of the masses was their state of serfdom, not but what they were also discontented with every other feature of their lot, for to speak generally, they had no part, no share in anything. Now, the ancient constitution, as it existed before the time of Draco, was organized as follows. The magistrates were elected according to qualifications of birth and wealth. At first, they governed for life, but subsequently for terms of 10 years. The first magistrates, both in date and importance, were the king, the polemarch, and the archon. The earliest of these offices was that of the king, which existed from ancestral antiquity. To this was added, secondly, the office of polemarch, on account of some of the kings proving feeble in war, for it was on this account that Ion was invited to accept the post on an occasion of pressing need. The last of the three offices was that of the archon, which most authorities state to have come into existence in the time of Medon. Others assign it to the time of Acastus, and adduce as proof the fact that the 9 archons swear to execute their oaths as in the days of Acastus, which seems to suggest that it was in his time that the descendants of Codrus retired from the kingship in return for the prerogatives conferred upon the archon. Whichever way it may be, the difference in date is small. But that it was the last of these magistracies to be created is shown by the fact that the archon has no part in the ancestral sacrifices, as the king and the polemarch have, but exclusively in those of later origin. So it is only at a comparatively late date that the office of archon has become of great importance, through the dignity conferred by these later additions. The Thesmothetai were many years afterwards, when these offices had already become annual, with the object that they might publicly record all legal decisions and act as guardians of them with a view to determining the issues between litigants. Accordingly, their office, alone of those which have been mentioned, was never more than annual duration. Ugh. So that was the first constitution, and so they say, okay, man, this is kind of long. I'm not sure. So they say, yeah, overthrow the tyranny afterwards. I don't know if this is really the most interesting text from Aristotle. Maybe like metaphysics or something could be good. What does this mean? What does what mean? Okay. I'll go for metaphysics. Whoa, lots of stuff. Unless it's short. Oh, it's pretty long. Yeah, I'll go for this. All men by nature desire to know. An indication of this is the delight we take in our senses, for even apart from their usefulness, they're loved for themselves, and above all others, the sense of sight. For not only with a view to action, but even when we're not going to do anything, we prefer seeing, one might say, to everything else. The reason is that this, most of all the senses, makes us know and brings to light many differences between things. By nature, animals are born with the faculty of sensation, and from sensation memory is produced in some of them, though not in others. And therefore the former are more intelligent and apt at learning than those which cannot remember. Those which are incapable of hearing sounds are intelligent, though they cannot be taught. Example, e.g., the bee, and any other race of animals that may be like it, and those which besides memory have the sense of hearing can be taught. The animals other than man live by appearances and memories, and have but little of connected experience. But the human race lives also by art and reasonings. Now from memory experience is produced in men, for the several memories of the same thing produce finally the capacity for a single experience. And experience seems pretty much like science and art, but really science and art come to men through experience, for experience made art, as Polus says, but inexperience luck. Now art arises when from many notions gained by experience one universal judgment about a class of objects is produced. For to have a judgment that when Callias was ill of this disease, this did him good, and similarly in the case of Socrates and many individual cases, is a matter of experience. But to judge that has done good to all persons of a certain constitution, marked off in one class, when they were ill of this disease, e.g., to phlegmatic or bilious people when burning with fevers, this is a matter of art. I wonder if there's a more sort of modern translation. I feel like this is not. It's kind of it's a bit kind of stuffy. So what do you say? Did I go to college? I didn't. It's a scam. Yeah, it's a scam, but it's needed to get in the door in some professions. Yeah, I would say I could have easily just learned the stuff I did. In fact, I did learn the stuff I did just by reading stuff online. So it is a scam. Of course, I didn't have to pay for it, so it was a scam for the taxpayer in my case because I was in Switzerland. Yeah, I did go to college. Yeah. Wait, what is this? This looks also like old shit. The midwife's vade mecum. What is this? Appropriate looking glass for the female sex? Okay, I'm going to look at just the sort of quick stuff. Particular directions for midwives, nurses, etc. Some genuine recipes for causing speedy delivery. Approved directions for nurses. Okay. On marriage, and at what age young men and virgins are capable of it, and why so much desire it. Also, how long men and women are capable of it. There are very few, except some professional debauchees, who will not regularly agree that marriage is honorable to all, being ordained by heaven and paradise, and without which no man or woman can be in a capacity honestly to yield obedience to the first law of the creation, increase and multiply. And since it is natural in young people to desire the embraces proper to the marriage bed, it behooves parents to look after their children, and when they find them inclinable to marriage, not violently to restrain their inclinations, which instead of allaying them makes them but the more impetuous, but rather provide such suitable matches for them as may make their lives comfortable, lest the crossing of those inclinations should precipitate them to commit those follies that may bring an indelible stain upon their families. The inclination of maids to marriage may be known by many symptoms, for when they arrive at puberty, which is about the 14th or 15th year of their age, then their natural purgations begin to flow, and the blood, which is no longer to augment their bodies, abounding, stirs up their minds to venery. External causes may also incline them to it, for their spirits being brisk and inflamed, when they arrive at that age, if they eat hard salt things and spices, the body becomes more and more heated, whereby the desire to veneral embraces is very great, and sometimes almost insuperable. and the use of this so much desired enjoyment being denied to virgins many times is followed by dismal consequences, such as the green weasel colonet, short breathing, trembling of the heart, etc. But when they're married and their venereal desires satisfied by the enjoyment of their husbands, these distempers vanish, and they become more gay and lively than before. Also, their eager staring at men and affecting their company shows that nature pushes them upon coition, and their parents neglecting to provide them with husbands, they break through modesty and satisfy themselves in unlawful embraces. It is the same with brisk widows who cannot be satisfied without the benevolence to which they were accustomed when they had their husbands. This is funny. I'm enjoying this. Yeah, you said you've read summaries and listened to lectures on philosophy, but you haven't read many of the classical philosophers. Yeah, kind of the same. So I figure I'd read a bit of Plato, but not much, but not all of it. I've read like summaries, and I haven't read Aristotle. Um, so I'm looking at Aristotle, but you see, there's a lot of it. There's a lot of it. At the age of 14, the menses in virgins begin to flow. Then they are capable of conceiving and continue generally until 44 when they cease bearing, unless their bodies are strong and healthful, which sometimes enables them to bear at 65. What? What? No. But many times the menses proceed from some violence done to nature, or some morbific matter, which often proves fatal. And hence men who are desirous of issue ought to marry a woman within the age aforesaid, or blame themselves if they meet with disappointment, though if an old man, if not worn out with diseases and incontinency, marry a brisk lively maiden, there is hope of him having children to 70 or 80 years, and that is true. Hippocrates says that a youth of 15, or between that and 17, having much vital strength, is capable of begetting children, and also that the force of the procreating matter increases till 45, 50, and 55, then begins to flag, the seed by degrees becoming unfruitful, the natural spirits being extinguished, and the humours dried up. Thus in general, but as to individuals, it often falls out otherwise. Nay, it is reported by credible author that in Sweden, seriously, they know about Sweden? I'm surprised that they know about Sweden. A man was married at 100 years of age to a girl of 30 years, and had many children by her, but his countenance was so fresh that those who knew him not imagined him not to exceed 50. Yeah, again, we can be sure that this is crap. And in Campania, where the air is clear and temperate, men of 80 marry young virgins and have children by them, which shows that age in them does not hinder procreation, unless they be exhausted in their youth and their yards be shriveled. If any would know why a woman is sooner barren than a man, they may be assured that the natural heat, which is the cause of generation, is more predominant in the man than in the woman. For since a woman is more moist than a man, as her monthly purgations demonstrate, as also the softness of her body, it is also apparent that he does not much exceed her in natural heat, which is the chief thing that concocts the humours in proper aliment, which the woman wanting grows fat, whereas a man, through his native heat, melts his fat by degrees, and his humours are dissolved, and by the benefit thereof are converted into seed. And this may also be added, that women generally are not so strong as men, nor so wise or prudent, nor have so much reason and ingenuity in ordering affairs, which shows that thereby the faculties are hindered in operations. This is weird shit. Weird shit. Okay, that was funny. I think I'll go back to this one. With a view to action, experience seems in no respect inferior to art, and men of experience succeed even better than those who have theory without experience. The reason is that experience is knowledge of individuals, art of universals, and actions and productions are all concerned with the individual, for the physician does not cure man except in an incidental way, but Callias or Socrates or some other called by some such individual name who happens to be a man. If, then, a man has a theory without the experience, and recognizes the universal but does not know the individual included in this, he will often fail to cure, for it is the individual that is to be cured. But yet we think that knowledge and understanding belong to art rather than to experience, and we suppose artists to be wiser than men of experience, which implies that wisdom depends in all cases rather on knowledge, and this because the former know the cause, but the latter do not. For men of experience know that the thing is so, but do not know why, while the others know the why and the cause. Hence, we think also that the master workers in each craft are more honorable and know in a truer sense and are wiser than the manual workers, because they know the causes of the things that are done. We think manual workers are like certain lifeless things which act indeed, but act without knowing what they do, as fire burns. But while the lifeless things perform each of their functions by natural tendency, the laborers perform them through habit. Thus, we view them as being wiser not in virtue of being able to act, but of having the theory for themselves and knowing the causes. And in general, it is a sign of the man who knows and of the man who does not know that the former can teach, and therefore we think art more truly knowledge than experience is. For artists can teach, and men of experience, of mere experience, cannot. Again, yeah, truly men over women. The wisdom of ages. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I'm seeing your comments late because I'm not always looking. But yeah. Again, we do not regard any of the senses as wisdom, yet surely these give the most authoritative knowledge of particulars. But they do not tell us the why of anything, e.g., why the fire is hot. They only say that it is hot. At first, he who invented any art, whatever that went beyond the common perceptions of man, was naturally admired by men, not only because there was something useful in the inventions, but because he was thought wise and superior to the rest. But as more arts were invented, and some were directed to the necessities of life, others to recreation, the inventors of the latter naturally always regarded as wiser than the inventors of the former, because their branches of knowledge did not aim at utility. Hence, when all such inventions were already established, the sciences which did not aim at giving pleasure or at the necessities of life were discovered, and first in the places where men began to have leisure. This is why the mathematical arts were founded in Egypt, for there the priestly caste was allowed to be at leisure. We have said in the Ethics what the difference is between art and science and the other kindred faculties. But the point of our present discussion is this, that all men suppose what is called wisdom to deal with the first causes and the principles of things, so that, as has been said before, the man of experience is thought to be wiser than the possessors of any sense perception whatever, the artist wiser than the men of experience, the master worker than the mechanic, and the theoretical kinds of knowledge to be more of the nature of wisdom than the productive. Clearly, then, wisdom is knowledge about certain principles and causes. Okay, so that was part 1 of book 1 of metaphysics. This is going to be long. Okay, maybe the summary. It is evident then, part 10. It is evident that then, even from what we have said before, that all men seem to seek the causes named in the physics, and that we cannot name any beyond these, but they seek these vaguely, and though in a sense they have all been described before, in a sense they have not been described at all. For the earliest philosophy is, on all subjects, like the one who lisps since it is young and in its beginnings. For even Empedocles says bone exists by virtue of the ratio in it. Now this is the essence and the substance of the thing, but it is similarly necessary that flesh and each of the other tissues should be the ratio of its elements, or that not one of them should, for it is on account of this in both flesh and bone and everything else will exist, and not on account of the matter, which he names, fire and earth, water and air. But while he necessarily have agreed if another had said this, he has not said it clearly. On these questions, our views have been expressed before, but let's return to enumerate the difficulties that might be raised on these same points, for perhaps we may get from them some help towards our later difficulties. Okay, I think the translator should have said use artisans instead of artists. Yeah, I agree. Wow, pretty revolutionary for his time, honestly. He touched on causality, principles, laws, etc. Yeah, and there's a lot more of this stuff. I wish we had a sort of more simple, more modern translation. I mean, but I'm not. Let's look at Scribd here. Maybe Scribd has better. I don't know, because this is pretty heavy. The way it was, I feel the translation is kind of heavy. Oh no, this is for buying. Here we've got to buy it. So I can have a free preview. Nah, screw this. Okay, too bad. If we're going to be reading Aristotle, it's going to be this heavy stuff. Yeah, I think it's better. I prefer it to I prefer Aristotle to Plato. That was interesting. What do we know about Empedocles? I'm not super um I know the story that Empedocles, because I lived in Sicily, and I know the story that Empedocles threw himself in the volcano. Um, he threw and Etna. Do you know Etna, the volcano Etna? Have you ever heard of that? It's also do you know the story of Polyphemus? Do you know that Ulysses? Ulysses. Ulysses. The Odyssey, all that, and he, had all his sort of stuff. His travels and unintentional, um, travels through the Mediterranean. And at one point, he ends up in Sicily, and Polyphemus is the Cyclope. Yeah. So Etna is a volcano. It's quite high. So I've been twice to the top of it. It's at 3,300 meters above sea level. Obviously, I didn't walk up from sea level. And so, do you know the story of Polyphemus? So it's a cyclope. He has just one eye. It's a giant with only one eye in the middle, and so what happens is that Polyphemus plans to eat Ulysses and his companions, but then he finally ends up somehow. You say, damn, white people like climbing mountains and shit. Yeah. Yeah, it's true, and also white people more prefer to climb mountains. It's like the British people, they went to Switzerland and they're the first ones who climbed the high mountains in Switzerland. And likewise, it was my dad who brought all his Sicilian colleagues up to the top of the volcano. Like they had never gone to the top of the volcano, and he had to bring his colleagues up. My dad from, my American dad to he had to do it. So yeah. It's especially Anglo people, I think, that like to do it. Um, so yeah, this is and this the myth is that he says, my name is nobody, and so then what he does is he says, I see, yeah. So he when Polyphemus first, he asks him what is the name, and he says nobody, and so then Polyphemus pokes Ulysses pokes Polyphemus in the eye with a stick. So then Polyphemus is blind, and then the other Cyclops come and say, "Hey, what happened?" And then he's blind, so Ulysses escapes because he's in a cave on Mount Etna, so he escapes. Um, and so then um he runs down the mountain, and he sort of he's unhappy, he yells. So the other Cyclops come and say, who did this to you? Who blinded you? And he says, nobody blinded me. And so that way then they're like, okay, well then there's nobody to go after, so they don't run after Ulysses as a result of that. And but Polyphemus still knows that Ulysses is out there somewhere, so in a rage, he still sort of fumbles his way out of the cave, um, out onto the open slope of the mountain. And so this is Etna. Okay, it's really a big ass volcano. Look, this is Sicily. Okay, and Etna is all of this. You can see that it forms a circle like this. It's this big ass volcano. I've gone skiing there. They got ski resorts. We went skiing there. We went yeah. And what do you mean by big brain? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean he was smart to say that the nobody thing, yeah, he had it all planned out. Ulysses had it really all planned out. Um that's kind of big, no, like, yeah. Yeah. You see you see, it looks pretty damn big. So it's this big thing like this. And so Polyphemus runs down towards the sea where his boat is. And Polyphemus, he stumbles out of the cave, and he throws a bunch of rocks. He throws a bunch of rocks towards Ulysses, and that gave rise to the rocks that were just overseas to where, according to legend, the rocks here, which is where I used to live, Arcitrezza. And these little rocks here are supposedly the rocks that Polyphemus threw Ulysses as he was running away. And so that's just the cool story. And I used to live right here. I used to live Via Manzella, which is it was there. It was this building right here. It was up here. And so we'd go off into like this, to the beach and stuff. This is the port. And here, Isole dei Ciclopi. See? Islands of the Cyclopes. Faraglioni dei Ciclopi. You see? Must have been pretty ripped. What do you mean pretty ripped? Oh, you mean Polyphemus? Yeah. I was thinking me, like what? No. Yeah, Polyphemus was pretty ripped. So he threw it. Well, he's a giant, right? That's the story, right? So Polyphemus is a giant. He like literally threw the rocks more than 10 kilometers, like about 15 kilometers, like 10 miles. Yeah, Polyphemus was pretty damn strong. And so they landed just right there. And then but Ulysses still escaped. So that's the story. That's the story. And the other story is Empedocles, which we saw about just there. Aristotle talking about Empedocles, and Empedocles, he then lived in Sicily. I don't think he was from Sicily. I can't really remember, but he did go to Sicily. In the end, I remember he also, this is the other Etna story, is that he ended up killing himself by diving into the crater at the top. This is the story. And so, yeah, I'll have a look at Empedocles again because I've sort of forgotten what he did. And this here is the Strait of Messina. So you see it's super narrow. So Messina is famous for having a huge earthquake in I can't remember the exact year, but in the early 1900s. There's a terrible earthquake. It's the most I think the most deadly natural disaster in Europe ever, and like the most deadly earthquake in the world ever, or something like that. Super deadly, killed loads of people here in Messina and Reggio, and yeah, that was really terrible. And this is also known, and probably maybe because of also there's a strong current here. There's really a strong current. So either because of the current or maybe no, probably because of the current. There's a famous legend of they call it Charybdis and Scylla. There's the two famous monsters that exist there in the Straits of Messina. And that is the story also of Ulysses that had to deal with Charybdis and Scylla in the Strait of Messina. So that's another thing here. So yeah, Empedocles. I kind of confused them. And then there's a famous death story. Do you know this death story of Aeschylus, the poet Aeschylus? So Empedocles here, pre-Socratic philosopher. Oh no, so he was from Sicily actually. Acragas. Okay. Okay, so it's near Agrigento. Okay, so it's in the southern side. Okay. Philosophy best known for originating the cosmogonic theory of the four classical elements. He also proposed forces he called love and strife, which would mix and separate the elements respectively. Okay. I don't know if you know much about Empedocles. I'd already seen this, but I kind of forgot it. Okay, influenced by Pythagoras, and yeah, Pythagoras is pretty cool too, like the Pythagorean theorem, and of course in math we all know about. Empedocles challenged the practice of animal sacrifice and killing animals for food. He developed a distinctive doctrine of reincarnation. He is generally considered the last Greek philosopher to record his ideas in verse. Okay. See, we're told, but there are other myths. A tradition is represented to have been removed from the earth, whose others had him perishing in the flames of Mount Etna. We're told that Empedocles leapt into the crater of Etna that he might be deemed a god. This appears to be a malicious version of a tale set on foot by his adherents, and that he had been snatched up to heaven in the night. Both stories would easily get accepted, for there was no local tradition. Empedocles did not die in Sicily, but in the Peloponnese, or perhaps at Thorioi. It is not at all unlikely that he visited Athens. Timaeus refuted the common stories about Empedocles at some length. He was quite positive that Empedocles never returned to Sicily after he went to Olympia to have his poems recited to the Hellenes. The plan for the colonization of Thorior would, of course, be discussed at Olympia. Okay, so etc. So yeah, it's a legend, probably not true. So here, 4 elements: fire, air, water, earth, love and strife. The sphere of Empedocles. The pure elements and the true powers coexisted in a condition of rest and inertness in the form of a sphere. The elements existed together in a purity, without mixture and separation, and the uniting power of love predominated in the sphere. The separating power of strife guarded the extreme edges of the sphere. Since that time, strife gained more sway, and the bond which kept the pure elementary substances together in the sphere was dissolved. The elements became the world of phenomena we see today, full of contrasts and oppositions, operated on by both love and strife. Okay. The sphere of Empedocles, being the embodiment of pure existence, is the embodiment or representative of God. Empedocles assumed a cyclical universe whereby the elements return and prepare the formation of the sphere for the next period of the universe. Okay, so he had a cosmogony here. So he thought they were like heads without necks, arms without shoulders, and then so they had these weird things, and then finally he had like proper beings or something. All right, and you're going. Okay. You don't know that name, Aeschylus. Okay. I know Talis and Democritus. Those are most focused on pre-Socratics and Parmenides. Okay, and you're going tonight. Okay. Okay. Well, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for being here. So, yep. Take care. And see ya. Bye bye.